you to keep that in mind. So this is just a basic way of providing our prop. Now let me show you how we are going to be extracting all of their types into either a separate shape or a separate type. Okay, so I'll just cut that from here, and I'm going to also remove that from here. And once again, we are getting all of that errors right here. So to do that, we can either create a type. You already know how to create a type if you are coming from my TypeScript course, but if you don't know how to create a type, you should go ahead and watch my TypeScript course. Now I'll just create my type, and I'm going to give it the name of like user shape. You can basically give it any name that you like. And now inside there, we are going to be just passing our types right here. So we are now creating our user shape, but now we have to tell our component that we want to use this user shape. So I'm going to copy that from here, and I'm going to just annotate my component props to this user shape. So as soon as I do that, I'm going to save my file and refresh that, and still we are getting that same result, and that errors are now successfully gone. So that's the first way. Now I can totally comment this line out, and we can also create an interface for this. So I'll just use like interface, and I'm going to give it the name of like user shape one more time, and we're not going to be using any equals to sign because we are now working with the interface. And now inside there we can use like name will be a string and age will be a number, and also we have the property of is student. Come on, is student, and that's going to be the boolean value. So as soon as I do that, save my file, and here you can see we are getting the same result, and we are no longer getting that error messages right here. This is how we are going to be working with the prompts with the component. But now in some situation, we will also want to use the children. So now let me just remove that from here. I'm gonna call my component as this way. So we want to pass some sort of a JSX inside there. I'm not gonna do anything crazy, but I'll just put a paragraph which will just say like hello, which means like we want to use our children right here. So to use them, for that we are going to be using our children. So we have to destructure our children right here. Come on, children. I'm gonna copy that, and we have to replace that with this h1 or maybe h2. And we have to render our children right here. So if I save my file, still we are getting this error right here because this children has no property and it is not available inside this user shape. So I'm going to remove that from here, and I can just write like children. And now what will be the type of this children? Like this is not a prop. This is neither a string nor a number or boolean or undefined or anything like this. So what in the world we are going to be specifying for this children? So we are going to be using something called the React node. Okay, so if I just use like React node, and if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import there right here, as you can see. So if I save my file, here you can see we are not getting any errors, and here you can see we are getting what hello. But now I want to see like what is inside this React node. So if I hold my control or command, and if I click on that, so it's going to brings us to, you guessed it, index.d.ts, which means like it's gonna brings us to types file. Like this file only includes the types, nothing else than there. So this React node can either be a React element, either a string, number, iterable, portal, boolean, null, undefined, and there are a lot of things that you can explore in this file, but I will never recommend you to like explore this file. There are a lot of things going on right here. Okay, so I'll just remove that from here. And this is how we are going to be specifying our React node for our children. Now this is the modern way of providing our shape for our prop, but there is also another way you will find like in the documentation or somebody else code. So I also want to show you there, so which is called the FC or functional component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove that from here, and I'm going to go back to my old prop. Like we have the name, age, and also the student. I'm going to save that file. I'm going to also remove that from here. We also don't need these children, so let's just remove that and also remove this. Okay, so we only have this user shape, and I'm going to uncomment there right now, save my file. Now I'm going to also destructure my name, age, and also the student property right here. And now let me show you the older way of providing a prop for our TypeScript. So this is how we are going to be doing there. First of all, we have to provide our colon, then we have to write a FC, which will be coming from the React.js. As you can see right here, FC like a functional component is coming from the React.js. And now we have to write like less than sign, and here we have to specify like a user shape, and we have to close there. And once you close there, and if I hover my mouse over to there, it is saying like all destructure element are unused, like you are not using that inside your code. And now to fix this problem, we are going to be using this. So I'll just use like h1, I'll write my name, and then age, and then finally is student property right here. So if I save that, and here you can see this is yet another way of providing a prop to our component. Welcome to the React TypeScript first challenge. So in this one, I want you to create the button component which will take three prop like label, on click and disable. So label will be just the label for our button, and the on click will be a function which will be executed whenever somebody clicks on our button. And also the disable will be a state like we can indicate either the true or false, and it's gonna make our button either disable or enable. So then finally you have to import that component inside the app.tsx file and just run there and make sure that you didn't get any errors. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my component, and inside this component I'll just create my button.tsx in this case. It's because we are now working with TypeScript, so we're going to have to create this tsx. Now I'll just write my rafce, save my file, go to my app and register that component right here. So I'll just write my button and close there like so. As I mentioned, it's going to take three prompts, so I'll just write a label, and the label will be set to click. So I'll just write a click right here, and also the on click event handler. In this case, we're going to be passing our arrow function, and I'll just say like console.log and click like so. And I'm going to also pass the disable state, so disabled, and for the disable state I'm going to set that to false. Now that we successfully provided our prop, we have to get that prop inside our component. So how can you go about doing that? And this is how we are going to be consuming or accessing that props. I'll use the prop, and here we also have to define a type for that. So I'll just use like label. For the label, that's going to be a string. We are going to be also passing the on click event handler, and that's going to be a function, so we have to just provide a void right here because we are not going to be returning anything from there. And also the disable state, and for the disable that's going to be a boolean value, so we also have to annotate that. Now we have to use that inside our UI, so I'll just remove this button and replace that with this button, actual button right here. And here we are going to be passing like prop.label, and also we have to provide the on click event handler. And for the on click event handler, we are going to be using like on click like so. We are going to be also passing the disable, okay, and that's going to be equals to that prop.disable. So I'm going to save my file, open my terminal, and use npm run dev. So it's going to run there inside my browser. So that's cool and everything, like we are getting our button, we're not getting any errors right here, but we can also refactor this code to use a destructuring. So I'll just remove these props, and I'm going to write like label and on click event handler, and also the disable state. We no longer have to provide these props and dots. I'll just select one and hit Control D and remove them. Now let me just save my file, and this is how my code looks like. And yeah, we can click on our button, and it's going to give us like something inside our console, as you can see. Welcome to the reusable prop typing with React.js and TypeScript challenge. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of types.ts inside the src directory. Then define the info type and extend the admin info list inside the types.ts file. So what is the info type? This type represents the base information shared by all users. It includes essential properties like ID, name, and email about a specific user. And yeah, that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. And in the next portion, you're going to have to create a component with the name of user info, and that component will display the user information based on the info type. Then create an admin info component, and that will display the user information and additional admin detail based on the admin info list type. Okay, and finally you have to import all of them inside the app.tsx file and just see like if you got some sort of error or not. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me just give you my solution. So I'm going to remove that and create first of all my component user info.tsx and also admin info.tsx. So I'll just create like rafc inside this one, and also the rafc inside the admin info component. Now let me go ahead and go to my app and register both of that component right here. So I'll use like user info and grab there. I'm gonna also use the admin info and also grab there right here. Now let me create some sort of a data. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my user, and that user will have the ID, and that's going to be set to like 1, and also have the name, which will be like, I don't know, John Doe, and also the email will be set to john@gmail.com. So that's going to be just for a normal user. We're going to be also creating one for the admin, and the admin will have the ID of 2, and also the name will be set to Jenny Smith or something. And also we're going to be providing an email, and that's going to be set to jenny@gmail.com. Okay, and now we are going to be providing a role, and the role will be set to admin. Come on, admin, like so. And we are going to be also providing the last login. So I'll just use like new date, and it's going to give us the last login. Now here you can see we've defined our data, and now we are going to be passing that data, but we also have to create a type for this data. So how can you go about doing that? I'm going to show you how we can do that, but now let me just pass this data as a prop. So I'll just write like user and user, and I'm going to also specify the admin, and which will be set to this admin data. Okay, so now let me go ahead and create my types right here inside this src folder. So I'll just create like type or types.ts, and here we're going to be defining our types. Like, let me just show you all of that like so. The id is now set to 1. So first of all, I'm going to just define like type of info, and this going to be a type. So the id is now set to number, so we're going to be providing a number. And also, come on, I forgot to include the equal to sign. I thought I was just creating some sort of object. Anyway, so the name is set to string. Also the email is set to string. Okay, now underneath there we're going to be also defining another type, which will be the admin info list type, and that's going to be coming from the info. Like, we want every single thing that the info have, and we also want to attach this new one. So for the role, here you can see we already get all of their data or all of their types from this info, and now you want to attach the role and also the last login. A role will be set to string, and the last login will be set to date. Okay, and finally we have to export this so that we can use that inside our file. So I'll just export that, but we have to explicitly tell it like this is a type. So I'll just use like info and type of admin list info right here. Okay, so now that we successfully created there, we also exported there, but now we have to use that inside our file. Okay, so to use them, I'm gonna grab first of all my info and also the admin list or admin info list to be precise. And we also have to annotate this list or this user with our type. So I'll just use like info, and I'm going to also provide my admin right here. So I'll use like admin list or admin info list right here. Okay, so now that's totally done. Now let me just go ahead and go to my component and grab all of their data. Let me just zoom in a bit, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my info from my types file, and here we're going to be defining our own type. So I'll just use like type user info prop will be fine, and that's going to be equal to the user, and for the user we are going to be defining all of their type. So I'll just use like the older way of providing a prop. So I'll use like react. Let me just get there, and I'm going to use like fc for functional component, and here we're going to be providing our user info prop, and I'm going to close that. I'm going to also destructure the user, like all of the data which we are now providing for this user, and we have to render that inside this component. So I'll use like h2, which will say like user info or information would be fine, and underneath that we are going to be creating our id, which will just give us like user.id, and I'm going to duplicate that a few times. So we have a name, and we also have the email address. So I'm going to just change this value to like name, and also change this id to email, and that's going to be fine. We'll be doing exactly the same thing for the admin info component. So what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm going to grab my admin info list. Okay, so once we grab them, I'm going to create my type of admin info props, and here we're going to be using like for the admin, we're going to be providing like admin info list, like this one right here. We're going to be placing it here. Okay, now I'm going to also use my react. So I'll just use like react .fc for the functional component, and I'm going to provide my admin info list right here. It's going to also take the perimeter, or not perimeter, but the prop of admin. So we have to take that, and we have to use that inside our component. So I'm going to remove them, and I'll use like h2 of admin information like so, and provide a paragraph with the id of admin.id, and just duplicate that a few times to the name, and also email, and also the role, and finally we have to just replace that with, or you know what, yeah, we have to write like admin.last login, and from there we are going to be getting like to locale string. Okay, and I'm going to execute there. Instead of providing the id, I'm going to just change that to a name, and I'm going to also provide the email here, and also the role, and finally we are going to be getting the last login like so. I don't know why we're getting this error. Does not exist on what type. Let me just grab that and put this one right here. Now that's successfully gone, and this should be locale string. Now let me save my file and check this out. So here you can see we are now getting the user information, and we are also getting the admin information, and anytime I save my file, it's going to give us a different second right here, which is cool. But now we are no longer getting any errors, and we are now successfully providing our types for each of the component prop. Okay, so now let's talk about the reusable types. So to show you there, first of all, I'm going to be creating my components folder, and we would have like user info.tsx, and I'm going to also create yet another component which will be for the admin info.tsx, and I'm going to go into my app component. But first of all, we have to write our RAFCE inside this component and also inside this component as well. I'm going to go into my app component, and first of all, I'm going to be importing my user info component and save there, and I'm going to also import my admin info component and save there as well. I'll just provide a bit of label right here like h1 and user info, and then I'm going to select this down hand, and I'm going to also copy there, and now let me just place it here, and let's just change this one to the admin info. So I'm going to save this file, and as you can see right here, first of all, we have our user info component, and then we have our admin info component right here. So now I'm going to pass a bit of prop to it, so I'll just use like username, and username will be Alex. Let me just write a Alex right here, and we are going to be also specifying the email like alex@gmail.com, and I'm going to also provide the age, and age will be set to 20, and I'm going to also provide a location, and location will be, I don't know, Earth, and also United States. I'm going to save this file, and now I'm going to copy every single thing from this component. Let me just place it right here to the admin component as well. So we are providing a name of Alex, we are also providing an email, age, and also the location. You know what, let me just change this location to something else like Mars or something, and unknown. And I'm going to also provide the admin property, and this will be a totally unique property. Like this component does not have the prop of admin, and this component has the prop of admin right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into my user info component right here, and first of all, I want to create my info, so I'll just write like type of info. You can create interface if you wanted to, so it's going to take like a username, and username will be a string. We're going to be also providing an email, and email will be a string as well. Let's just provide an age, and age will be a number, and provide a location, and location will be a string of array. So now we have to use that inside our user component. I'll first of all destructure my username, then email, and then age, and also the location, and we will annotate that with this info component, not a component but a type. Now if I save my file, it's going to say that we have to use all of these props inside our component. So to do that, I'm going to change this div to the UL, and now inside this UL, we are going to be defining a few LIs like LI for the username, and also let's just duplicate there a few times for the email, and also for the age. And now I'm going to use my json.stringify, so we can see the value of this location. So I'll just provide like location, and now I'm going to save my file, and I'm getting some sort of error, LOCATION, and there we go. So now if I save my file, we are getting all of that data, which is looking amazing. I'm going to basically copy every single thing from this component. Now let me just place that inside this component right here. Save my file. Now we also have to destructure the username, email, and also the age. Copy there and place that right here. So now I'm going to copy this info. We're going to go into our admin component, and now let me just place that here, and instead I'm going to change that to a info, like for the admin component info. I'm going to copy that, and now let me place that, and as you can see right here, we are not getting any errors. But if I go into my app.tsx component, here you can see we are getting this error, like this admin is not defined. So if I go ahead and go to my admin component, and if I just use like provide a comma and provide my admin right here, save my file, now it's going to complain like, Hussein, you have to register there inside your a info type. So to do that, I'm going to use like admin and provide a string right here. So here you can see that error is now successfully gone. But did you notice one thing? We are now repeating ourselves. We are copying this type, and we are now placing there right here just because of this one admin. And why are we doing that? That's because this admin is unique to this component. We can totally use it right here. So if I just copy there, and now I can totally use my admin right here, save my file, that's totally done. And because of this admin prop, we are now copying the entire thing, and we are now placing there right here. So if you don't want to use that, so for that, we are going to be using the reusable component inside the TypeScript. So how are we going to be doing that? To do that, I'm going to go into my users info, and I will just provide the export right here. So if I just provide this export, so which means like I can totally use this type anywhere I want, in any component I want. Okay, so now if I go ahead and go to my admin component, I can totally remove that, and now I can import my info right here. So if I hit enter right here, so it's going to import that from the user info. I'm going to copy that, and now let me just place it right here, save my file, once again we are getting an error for this admin. So to fix that, we have to define another type. So I'll just use like admin info list, and we are going to be using first of all the info, like all of the props which are already available inside this info. We also want to use all of them, and we are going to be providing an and now we have to define our new one. So we also want to use the admin, and admin will be a string. Okay, so if I copy that, and now let me just place it right here. Come on, let me just place it right here, save my file, and as you can see right here, those errors are now successfully gone. So this is how we are going to be defining the type for our prop in one component. We just have to export that. This is how we are going to be importing that. And now later, if we decide to add some more prop, so this is how we are going to be attaching that by using this AND operator. Okay, now the final thing I want to show you is that you can explicitly type a type right here, which means like we are now telling our TypeScript compiler like this is going to be some sort of a type. This is not a component, this is not some sort of a data available inside a other file. These are types. So now we are telling our compiler like these are types, so it's gonna treat it as a type. Okay, so yeah, that was the reusable component. And next we're going to be learning about the useStat types. Okay, so now let's talk about how we are going to be using our types for our useStat. So to do that, I'm going to create my components folder, and I'm going to define my counter.j, not JSX but TSX right here. Let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, and register that counter inside my app. So I'll just use like counter, and now let's just register there right here. So if I save my file, and as you can see, we are now getting our counter, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to define my count. So I'll just use like const count, and then set count will be equals to the useStat, and we are going to be providing the initial value of 0 to that. Okay, so it is not complaining, but if you want to provide a type for our useStat, this is how we are going to be doing that. So if I hover my mouse over to there, and as you can see right here, this is a generic function, which means like we can provide more types at once. And if you guys don't know what a generic function is or generics are, so you should definitely go ahead and watch my TypeScript course, and there I explain generics in a more great detail. So I'll just specify the type of number right here, and here you can see we can specify the number, we can specify the string, we can provide like undefined, we can provide null if you want, we can provide any kind of type. So I'm going to just specify like number, and this is how we're going to be defining a useStat inside our TypeScript component. Okay, so now we can totally use that. We can do like basically anything we want to do with this. So I'll just use like counter app, and inside there we are going to be creating our count as a paragraph, and I'm going to specify count as a value. Underneath that we are going to be creating our button, which will just say increment, and also we are going to be creating a component, and let me just duplicate that and change that to decrement, and let's just provide a bit of the on click on there when somebody clicks on there. So what do we have to do in that situation? We're going to be using our set count. In the first case, we're going to be incrementing our counter by 1, and in the second case we are going to be decrementing our counter by 1. So now if I save my file, and as you can see right here, I can increment my counter and I can also decrement my counter. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type for our useStat. Welcome to the useStat challenge with React.js and TypeScript. So the first thing that you have to do is that you have to define a stat variable by using the useStat and type that explicitly. So I will recommend you to create a counter component by using the useStat and annotate that with a number. Okay, so if you can even do this one, you don't even have to do the first step, to be honest. Now for the second step, you have to create a user profile component, and then inside that profile component, you're going to be defining your stat by using the useStat, which will hold the object with the user information and type it accordingly. Okay, like basically you're going to be creating some sort of an object which will have like the username, age, and some sort of location or something like that. You can put like basically any kind of user information if you wanted to. Next, you have to create a to-do list.tsx, define a stat variable for the to-do list item, and type that accordingly. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me just give you my solution. So I'm going to create a user profile. Oh, you know what? We're not going to do that, not right now. First of all, let me just show you the counter component. So I'll just create like const count and then set count. Come on. Set count like so, and that's going to be equals to the useStat, and the initial value will be 0. And now if you want to annotate that with a number, so this is how we are going to be doing that. So we can also just write our h1, and here we are going to be defining our counter or count to be precise. And next we have to create our button, which will allows us to increment our counter. So I'll write like on click, and when somebody clicks on there, we are going to be firing this function. So I'll just use like const increment function. and inside this function we are going to be using the set count, and let's just provide our previous previous count would be fine, and then previous count plus 1. So now if I save my file, and I'm going to use my npm run dev to run there, and here you can see we are now getting our counter. If I click on this, it's going to just increment there by 1. So that was the easy part. Now we are going to be also creating our user component, and we are going to be typing there. So I'll use like user profile dot not JSX but TSX in this case. Let me just use my RAFCE inside there, go to the bottom, and here we are going to be rendering our user profile component like so, and this is how it will look like right here. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to define my state, so I'll just use like use state, and here we're going to be passing an object, and first of all I'm going to pass like a name. We're going to be also providing an age of 0, and the email will be set to empty string. Okay, so I'll just annotate there with the interface, or you can also create the type if you wanted to. So I'll just create an interface, and the interface name will be user profile, or user profile state or something. So I'll write a name which will be a string. I'll also write the age which will be a number, and also the email which will be a string. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this user profile. You know what, user profile state would be fine. So I'm gonna copy them, and now let me put there right here, or annotate there here like so. And what I want to do is that I want to create my profile, and also set profile, and it's going to be equals to this use state. Next we have to use there, so I'm going to remove this user profile, and I will just write like user profile inside the h2, and I'm going to also write the input field, and inside this input field the type will be set to text, and I'm going to also provide the placeholder of name to there, and the value will be set to profile dot name. And I'm going to also provide the on change event handler when somebody changes something or types something inside this input field. So we are going to be firing this function which will say like update name. This is the function which we are going to be creating in a few seconds, and it's going to take the event.target.value and it's going to pass the for this function. And you know what, I'm going to just create this function right away. So yeah, I'll just do that right now. I'll use like const update name. It's going to take the name, and we will annotate there with a string. And inside there we are going to be using a set profile. It's going to take the previous profile, and here we just have to use like first of all we have to copy our previous profile. Come on, previous, previous, or prev profile to be precise, and we're going to be also providing a new value to there. Okay, so this is how we're going to be defining our update name. And let me just see. So if I just type something, but I cannot submit there, so that's why we cannot see there. Anyways, you will get there in a few seconds. I'm gonna also define yet another input field, so I'll use like input with the type of number in this case, and here we're going to be providing the placeholder of age to them. I'm gonna also provide the value, and for this value we are going to be using like profile.age is greater than 0. If that's the case, we're going to be getting like profile.age, but if that's not the case, we're going to be setting there to empty string. And also when somebody change or types something inside there, we are going to be firing this update age function which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. And I'm going to paste like event.target.value inside there. And now underneath this input field we are going to be defining yet another input field, so I'll use like input, and the type will be set to email. We are going to be also passing the value, and value will be coming from the profile.email. And when somebody types something inside there, we are going to be firing the event object and creating this update email function in a few seconds. And I'll use like event.target.value. Finally, we have to render our content, so I'll use like h3, and here we're going to be writing like profile summary, and underneath them we're going to be creating our paragraph. And first of all, let me just render my profile.name, and I'm going to duplicate there like 3 times, so we have a profile.age and also profile.email. Okay, so let's just change that to age and change this one to email. And yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. But we also have to create this update age and also the update email. So I'm gonna just create there right here. Const update age. It's gonna take age as a parameter, and we will just annotate that as a string. Okay, so now inside there we are going to be using like set profile, and here we have to provide our previous profile. And inside there we are going to be first of all cloning our previous profile, and then we have to just provide a new value to that. Okay, so we are going to be passing an age, and now we want that age to be a number, so we can convert this age to a number like so by using this number constructor, or we can just write a plus, so it's going to also convert that to a number. And now underneath them, we're going to be also defining our update email. So I'll use like update email, and it's going to take the email as a parameter, and there's going to be a string. So we also have to annotate them. And I'm going to use like set profile, and here we once again we have to provide our previous profile, and then we're going to be making a clone of there by using dot 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 previous profile. Come on, profile, and I'm going to also provide the new email to there. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. So let me just see. Here you can see we have our user profile. We don't have nothing for the name. For the age we have like only 0, and for the email we don't have anything. So if I just write like my own name, and it's gonna add there right here for this name. I can also change the age to like 22, and I can also provide the email like test@gmail.com. It's gonna add there right here. So this is going to be my profile summary. So that's done. Now it's time to create our to-do list application. So I'm going to go ahead and create my to-do .tsx or to-do to-do list.tsx would be fine. I don't know what the hell am I thinking of right now. So let's, oh my god. You know what? To do would be fine. So to do.tsx is fine, and I'm going to write my RAFC inside there, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my app and register there right here. So let's just write our to do and register there. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to write like to do's, or yeah, to do's would be fine, and then set to do's, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be just empty array. I'm going to also create an interface for that, because we're going to be creating our to-dos which will have an interface of to-do. I'm going to provide the ID, and ID will be a number. I'm going to also provide the task, and the task will be a string, and the completed will be set to boolean. And now let me get this to-do interface, and we have to annotate our state to there. So let's just write our to-do, and here we have to annotate that like so. And now let me go to the UI and change this UI. So I'll use like h2 to-do list, and underneath there we're going to be creating a button which will say like add to do like so. And for this button, when somebody clicks on there, we are going to be firing this function. So let's just use like add to do, and we're going to be providing god damn it add to do, and we're going to be providing a new to do inside there. Let me just create this function right away. So I'll just create that right here, and yeah, I guess that's going to be fine. So let's just create that add to do, and it's going to take a task as a parameter, and we will annotate that as a string. Okay, so inside there, first of all, we are going to be creating our new to do, and I'm going to also annotate that with this to do, and here that's going to be equals to this object. So it's going to take the ID, and ID will be coming from to-dos.length +1. So that's going to be just basically my ID, and we're going to be also providing a task which we are taking as a parameter, and we're going to be providing there for this function. And I'll also provide the completed, and that's going to be set to false. Just like I'm going to have to provide a commas instead of providing that whatever that was. Let's just provide a set to do's, and finally we have provided a previous to do, or to do's will be fine. And here we have to just make a clone of previous to do's. So let's just write our prev to do's, and I'm going to add my new to do to there. Okay, so let's just hide this one. I'm going to put that at the top. We are going to be rendering our to do, so I'll use like ul, and I'm going to iterate over through all of the to-dos by using the map. And it's going to take a to-do as a parameter, and inside there we are going to be using our li to render over each to-do. So for each of the to-do, I'm going to write like to-do.task, and then I'm going to write like is it completed or not. So I'm going to use like to-do.completed, completed, god damn it. So just to-do.completed. If that's the case, completed. If that's the case, we're going to be just writing like completed. But if that's not the case, so we are going to be setting there to empty string. Okay, and I'll also provide a key. So I'll just write like to-do.id as a key. I'm gonna save this file, and finally let me go into my app.tsx. We already provided all of that, so let's just test this out. So here you can see we have our add to do. I'm gonna click on that, so it's gonna just add a new to do anytime I click on that. So yeah, that was our example about the use state, and we learned a lot about how we can annotate our use state. So that was it about for the count example, for the user profile example, and also the to-do list example as well. Now we are going to be covering 3 topics at once, like useref, forms, and events, like how we are going to be providing up types for the useref, forms, and also for the events. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside this component folder we are going to be providing our form.tsx, and inside there I'm going to just use my rafc, save my file, and we also have to register there inside our app component. So I'll just use my form, and if I hit enter, so it's going to grab that from my components folder. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to define my state, which will be like submitted, and also set submitted data, and we're going to be storing there inside the use state. And for the initial value I'm going to specify the name, and name will be set to empty string. We are going to be also providing an email, and email will be set to string, and we also have a password, and password will be also empty string. So now we can create a separate type for all of them. To do that, I'm going to be using a type, and I'm going to give it the name of like form data, and inside there we are going to be defining a name which will be a string. I'm going to also provide the email which will be a string, and also the password which will be also a string. Okay, so I'm going to copy this data right here, and now we have to annotate our use state with this data. I'm going to be using my form data, and now let's just annotate our use state with that data. So now that's totally done. Next we are going to be also using the use ref. So I'll just use like const name, and we are going to be using a use ref for that. And if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import that from the React.js. We don't need the reducer, so let's say bye bye to that. And the initial value will be set to null. Okay, and I'm going to just duplicate that a few times. So I'm going to just change the variable name to like email, and also to the password as well. So now we have to specify a specific type for this use ref. So we are going to be using this use ref inside our form and inside our specific HTML input element. So we have to tell our use ref that we are going to be using this name, email, and password inside the HTML input element. Okay, so I'll just use like HTML input, and if I hit enter, and here you can see we are going to be using our type on the HTML input element. So I'm going to copy that from here. Let me just use that here and also here. Okay, so this is how we're going to be providing a type for the use ref. And now let's just use that inside our component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this div, and I'm going to change that with this form. I'll just remove this form from here, and now I'm going to provide my input field, and that input field will take the type of text. We're going to be also providing a placeholder which will say like enter your name, and also I'm going to be defining my ref. Come on, my ref, and it's going to be referencing to this name. Okay, so I can totally duplicate that a few times. I'm going to just change that to email, and also to the password as well. Okay, so I'll also change these to email, and also this one to password as well. So if I save my file, that's everything that we have to do for now. But I'm going to also create a button which will say submit. Okay, and we're going to be also providing a type for that, and the type will be set to submit. Now underneath there we want to show our data, so I'm going to just write a section, and now inside this section I'm going to write my h1 which will be set to name. And first of all we have to grab our submitted data, and we're going to be using the dot name property on there. Okay, so as you can see right here, so we have our submitted data, and we have the name, we also have the email, and also the password. If you want to see all of the data, so I'm going to just duplicate that like a few times. We have to change that to the email, and also change this one to the password as well, just like this. So I'll just change this one to the email, and I'm going to also change this one to the password. So if I save my file, and that's everything that we have to do for the UI. But now we are going to be attaching our event on the form. So when somebody submit that form, like when somebody fill that form and submit there, and if you want to provide our arrow function right here like this, we don't have to specify a type for that. But if you want to extract all of that logic into a separate function, so for that we have to specify some sort of a type for that. So I'll just use like handle submit, and I'm going to copy there, and let's just create our handle submit right here. Okay, so I'm going to be using like const handle submit. It's going to take the event, and as you can see right here, we are now getting this error. So to fix this error, we have to tell our TypeScript that we are using a form event, like we are using a event on the form right here. And we also have to tell it that we are going to be firing this function on the HTML form element like this one. Okay, so we also have to tell it there. I'm going to be using like HTML form element, and now if I hit enter, so this is how we are going to be telling our compiler that we are going to be firing this event on the form event, and then we are going to be using that on the HTML form element. Okay, so I can just use like event dot prevent default, so it's going to just prevent our default behavior. And now I can just grab like const name value, like whatever user type inside this input field right here, like the name input field. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just use like name, and I'm going to be getting a current property. That's because of this name right here, which is now set to this reference. And now if I just use the dot value, and what are we getting? We are now getting an error. If I hover my mouse over to there, it is now giving us like name dot current is possibly null. It is null, not possibly, because we already set that to null. So how can we fix this error? To fix this error, we can use the null insertion operator right here, which we already covered in my TypeScript course. If you guys don't know about this, so you can definitely watch my TypeScript course. But if you guys already know that, that's cool. So basically we are now telling our compiler like, you don't have to worry about this code, like it can never be null and it can never be undefined. We are now telling this to our compiler like, you don't have to worry about our code. Okay, so now I'm going to just duplicate there like a few times, maybe 2 times more, and I'm going to change this variable name to like an email value, and I'm going to also change this one to the password value as well. Okay, so we can totally log that to the console, or we can just submit that to our DOM. So I'll just use like set submitted data, and we are going to be providing our object. Let's just provide a name, and for the name we are going to be providing like a name value, which is this variable right here. I'm going to also provide a comma, and let's just provide an email, and that's going to be the email value. And also for the password, we are going to be using the password value, or password value rather. So if I save my file, now we no longer have any errors right here, because we successfully types or we successfully provided a types for everything. And now here you can see we are now getting this UI. So anything I type inside there, like for instance, if I specify my name of Hussein, and my email will be test@gmail.com, and what is that? Password. Enter your email, and enter your password. There we go. So if I save there, now I can write like my real password, and now if I submit there, here you can see, oh, we are getting Hussein once again, and I'm providing a test and my real password. Why is that? Oh, that's because we are using a name again and again. We have to change that to the email, and also we have to change that to the password right here. So if I save my file now, and if I submit there, now we are getting a name as Hussein, email as a test@gmail.com, and password my real password right here. So if I just refresh there, and let me type something at gmail.com and something cool, and now let me click on this submit, and this is how we are going to be getting all of their data right here. Okay, so this is how we are going to be providing types for the prompt, for the form, and also for the event, and also for the useref. Create a file with the name of focus input.tsx inside the src directory, and define a component that user useref to focus on the input field when the button is clicked. Type the ref appropriately. So that's going to be the first part. In the second part, create a file with the name of contact form.tsx inside the src directory, and then define a form component with the type of state and form handler. After that, create a file with the name of event handling.tsx inside the src directory, and define a component that demonstrates typing different event handlers. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my focus input.tsx. I'm going to use my RAFC inside there. Go to my app. First of all, let's just save there and register my focus. Oh god damn it, FOCUS. Oh my god, FOCUS. If I can type it today. So focus input right here. And now if I check this out, so here you can see we are now getting our focus input, which is looking cool. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the useRef, which not a reducer, useRef, which will be coming from the React.js. And here we are going to be providing the initial value of null to them. I'll store it in the variable with the name of like input ref, and that's going to be equals to this use ref. And we will also annotate them with the HTML input element, which will be coming from the definition file. So if I hold control and click on there, and here you can see we can now get like all of that, what do we call it, their types from the TypeScript. So yeah, that's the first thing. Now next we have to use this. So I'll just write like input field with the type of text, and I'm gonna also write the ref, and we will just reference that to the input ref. Let me define my placeholder, which will say like click the button to focus me. like so. And finally, we are going to be also providing a button, and when somebody clicks on their button, we're going to be firing a function which will be a handle focus. Handle focus will be fine, and focus input will be the label. Now let me create this handle focus right here underneath this input ref. So I'll just use like const handle focus, and that's going to be an arrow function. We're going to be getting our input ref dot current value, and we are going to be only using the focus inside there. So now let me save my file and check this out. So anytime I click on this input field, so it's going to focus my input field, and this is how we are going to be annotating there. So that was the first step. Now for the next step, we are going to be creating our contact form. So contact form .tsx, and here let's just use our RAFCE and register there right here. So we have our contact form and register there and save there. So what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm going to use my useStat, and here we're going to be providing our object, and inside this object we will have our name, and also we would have our email like so, and we are going to be destructuring the form data and also set form data, and it's going to be equals to this useStat. And now for this form data, we are going to be annotating there with the interface. So now let me just create an interface for that. So we're not going to be doing anything crazy. You can either create a type if you wanted to, but in my case, I'm going to create an interface with the name of like contact form stat. And basically you can give it like any name that you prefer. And I'm going to write a name and annotate there with the string, and email and annotate there. Come on, email with the email and annotate there with the string as well. So I'm going to copy there, and I'm going to annotate my useStat with this contact form stat right here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this div, and I'm going to replace that with the form, and I'm going to also replace this other one to the form as well. So let's just create our div. Inside this div, we're going to be creating our label. Remove this HTML4 from there, and I'm going to also provide my name inside there. First of all, we are going to be registering the input field, and this input field will have the type of text. Name will be set to name, and we're going to be also providing a value, and that value will be coming from the form data dot name. Okay, so we are going to be also providing the on change event handler, and when somebody types something inside there, so we are going to be firing this handle change event. Now let me duplicate this div right here for the email. So I just duplicated there and changed there to email, and also change this text to email, and we're going to be also changing the name to the email as well. Okay, so change the name to the email, and in this case we're going to be still providing this handle change, and underneath this div we're going to be creating our button which will say like submit, and for this button we're going to be providing the type of submit to that. Okay, like so. And now finally we have to just create our handle change function inside this component. So I'll use like const handle change. It's going to take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there by using the change event. So let's just write our change event, and here for this change event we're going to be using there on the HTML input field. So we also have to explicitly specify that HTML input field as well. Okay, so from the event.target we're going to be destructuring the name and also the value. So now let me just destructure the name and also the value out of this event.target. Okay, so here we're going to be using like set form data, and let's just provide our previous state to that. And once again we are going to be making a clone of our previous state, and here we're going to be defining a name, and then we have to provide a newer value which we are now getting from this event.target right here. Okay, so now I'm going to save there, and that's going to be it for our handle change. Next, we also have to define our on submit function. So whenever our form is submitted, so we're going to be firing our handle submit function. I'm going to copy there and create my handle submit right here, provide our event, and we will annotate there with the form event. And here we also have to tell it that we are going to be using there on the HTML form element, HTML form, and then element like so. Okay, so here we have to use our arrow function. We're going to be preventing the default behavior, and also underneath there we have to just log to the console or form data, and here we are going to be using some sort of a label like form submitted like so. Okay, that was a lot of talking, and yeah, you know what, let me just test this out. So here you can see we have our name and email. For the name, I'm gonna specify my own name. For the email, I'll just write like test@gmail.com, and now if I click on this submit and open my console, so it's gonna give us all of their data right here, but we are getting some sort of error. I type Hussein and test@gmail.com and click on there. Now we are getting our form submitted and also our email and our name data. So which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. And this is how we are going to be providing an annotation or TypeScript for our event object. And this is how we are going to be providing the or this is how we're going to be creating an interface for our state. Now let me create the final component which will be for the event handling. So we're going to be using like event handling.tsx. I'm going to use my RAFC inside there. Go to my app and register that component right here. So event handling, and I'm going to just call this component. Check this out, and we have our event handling, which is looking amazing. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my H2, which will say like event handling example. And now underneath there, I'll just create a button, and that button will say like click meh. And here we also have to provide the on click event handler, and when somebody clicks on the handle click, so in that situation we are going to be just firing this function like handle click, and we are going to be also creating an event for this one. So like when somebody mouse enter, so in that situation we are going to be firing this function like handle mouse enter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define both of these functions. So first of all, let's just define this handle click one, then we're going to be defining this handle mouse enter. Okay, so I'm going to copy there and create my handle click. It's going to take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there with the mouse event, and we also have to explicitly tell it that we're going to be firing that event on the HTML button element like so. And here inside there we're going to be logging to the console like event.current, come on, current current target, and also we have to just provide some sort of a label like button clicked or something like that. I'm gonna save my file, and we are getting some sort of error. Oh, that's because we have to write a react dot. So I'm gonna use react and hit enter. So it's gonna grab this react from the react.js. That's the first thing. Now we also have to define this function. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define there right here. So const handle mouse enter. It's going to also take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there by using react.mouse and mouse event, and then we're going to be telling it that we're going to be firing there on the HTML dev element. Okay, so I'm going to also provide what do we call it, console.log, and here we're going to be using like e.current target right here. And I'm going to also provide some sort of a label which will say like mouse entered or something. Now let me save there and test this out. And here you can see we have our label, and we also have our button. Let me just refresh there, and whenever I hover my mouse over to there, so it's going to give us that mouse entered, and it's gonna also gives us, let me just show you that it's gonna also gives us that specific div. So now inside this div we have our event handling example and also our button. And now if I hover my mouse over to this click me, it's gonna also gives us like mouse enter. It's gonna gives us that data. So yeah, that was example, or that was a challenge for the, let me just show you the focus input, contact form, and also the event handling. Now let's talk about how we are going to be using a TypeScript with context API. So to do that, I'm going to create a folder with the name of context, and now inside this folder I'll just create like my context.tsx. and now inside there, first of all, we're going to have to import our create context from React.js. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create an instance of that. So I'll use my export and then const my context, and that's going to be equals to the create context. So we are going to be creating an instance of that. And now for the initial value, I'm going to provide a count, and count will be equal to 0. And we're going to be also creating an increment function which will just return nothing for now. And then we are going to be also creating one more function for the decrement. Okay, so I'm going to save this file. And now if you want to add a TypeScript for our context, so this is how we are going to be doing there. You can either create a type, or you can also create an interface if you wanted to. So I'll just create my interface right here, and I'm going to give it the name of like my context props. And now inside there we have a count which will be a number, and we also have an increment function, and from this increment function we are going to be only returning the void, like nothing for now. Then we are going to be also creating one for the decrement. So now let me just duplicate there and create our decrement function. And now if you want to add there, so I'll just write my less than sign, and then I'll write like my context prop, and I'm going to close there at this way. Okay, so this is how we are going to be defining our context. And now let's talk about how we are going to be creating our provider. So to create our provider, I'm going to just write like const my provider. Come on, my provider, there we go. It's going to take a children as a prop, and then inside there we are going to be using like const and then count and then set count. This is going to be the state which you want to pass into our component. So we are going to be using like useState, and the initial value will be set to 0. So it is now taking a children, so we have to provide a type for that as well. So I'll just use like my FC, like my functional component, which will be coming from the React.js, and then we have to provide our prop right here. So this is how we're going to be creating there. I'll use my interface and then my provider. Yeah, that's going to be fine. We're going to be providing a children, and that's going to be coming from the React node. And if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import there right here. Okay, so now I'm going to take there and I'm going to put there right here, save my file, and now it's going to give us an error because we have to use it. Now first of all, let me just export this so that we can use it in other files. So I'll use like export default and then my provider, come on, my provider, like so, save my file, and now inside this my provider, I'm gonna just return first of all my context, and come on, what the hell am I doing? And then I'm gonna use the provider method on there. Okay, so I'll just close there. Inside this provider, I'm gonna have to pass some sort of a data, so I'll use like value, and for the value we are going to be passing a count which we've already defined right here. And now let me just use my increment and decrement function. So I'll use like increment, and now inside this increment we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but I will just use like set count and then count plus 1, and I'm going to also create one more function for the decrement as well. So I'll use like decrement right here, and I'm going to decrement my value right here. I'll just write a minus, and I'm going to also copy both of them and place there right here along with the count. So I'll just place the increment, and I'm going to also copy the decrement, and I'm going to place there. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see all of the errors are now gone, and obviously we have to use these children inside our JSX. So I'll just provide there right here like so. So if I save my file, and this is how we are going to be providing a type for our context. Now I'm going to go into my main component, and we have to use that right here. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my provider right here. I'm going to copy that from there, and let's just use that on all of the entire app. Okay, so I'm going to put that here, save my file, and this is how we are going to be successfully adding there. But now I'll just create a counter component. I'll write like component, and then counter.tsx would be fine. I'm going to use my RAFCE, save my file, go into my app component, and let's just register that counter right here so that we can see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to just register my counter component right here. And now we have to use our context inside this counter component. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be importing the use context from the React.js, and then we are going to be also importing our own context, like my context, okay, from the context folder. And now to use that, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to write my FC. So I'll just use like FC for the functional component, and I guess that's going to be fine. And inside there, I will use my use context. I'm going to provide my own context to there, like my context, and we're going to be destructuring a lot of things from it. So like I need the count and also the increment function and also the decrement function from my context or my use context. So now inside there, let's just use the inside our component. I'm going to remove this div from here and provide my paragraph and provide the count, and the initial value for this count will be set to that count which is coming from our context. We're going to be also creating a button which will say like increment, come on, increment, and also let's just create one for the decrement and attach event handler on both of these buttons. The first one will take the increment and the second will take the decrement. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our count. If I click on this, so it's going to increment my counter, and if I click on this one, so it's going to decrement my counter right here by 1. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a TypeScript for our context. Now let's talk about how we are going to be providing a type for our use reducer. So I'll just create a components folder, and inside there we're going to be creating our counter.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFCE so that I can see something on the screen. And here we're going to be registering our counter component. So if I save my file and check this out, so here you can see we are now getting our counter, which is looking amazing. Now inside this counter component, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import the use reducer from the React.js, and then we have to use the inside our counter component. So I'll use like use reducer. It's going to take the reducer function and also the initial state. So we're going to be providing like count, and count will be set to 0. Okay, so we are going to be destructuring our state and dispatch functions. So I'll just use like state and also the dispatch. And now that we have to create our reducer, and also we have to provide a type for this state. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create my reducer function right here. I'll just give it the name of like reducer. It's going to take the state and also the action. And now in this function, we are going to be using our switch and cases one more time. And first of all, we are going to be providing if the action.type Come on, let me just write a type is set to increment. increment. There we go. So in that situation, we are going to be only returning the count, and count is going to be coming from the state.count plus 1. And if that's not the case and the case is decrement, so in that situation, what do we have to do? We have to once again return our count, and count will be coming from the state.count minus 1. Okay. And also if that's not the case, so for the default value, we are going to be providing our state right here. I'm going to remove that, and here you can see we are now getting an error like what is a state and what is a action. So to do that, we are going to have to provide a type for that. So now I'm going to just create a type right here with the name of action or actions. I guess action would be fine because we are going to be doing only one action, and I'm going to provide the property of type to that, and that type can be either increment or that type can be, come on, let me just write type can be set to decrement, as we've already specified there right here, like either increment or decrement. So now that we have to use that right here for this action, so I'm going to just annotate there with this action. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to take care of this state. So we are going to be also creating a type for the state as well. So I'll use like type, and then let's just use a state. And now inside there, we are going to be specifying a count, and count is now set to number. And we have to take this state, we have to provide there right here, and we are going to be also returning a count property from there, so we can also annotate this entire function as a state. Okay, so this is what we have to do. First of all, we have to create an action type, and we have to specify there for the actions. Then we have to create a state type, and we have to specify there for the state. Okay, so this is what we have to do for this reducer function. And now let's just use this state and also this dispatch function inside this UI. So to use them, I'm going to be using a paragraph, and I'll just provide a count. And that count will be coming from the state.count. And now underneath there, we are going to be creating a button which will just say like increment, and also we're going to be creating one for the decrement, decrement. There we go. I'm going to provide an on click event handler on both of them, which will just fire this dispatch function. Let's just fire this dispatch function, and we're going to be providing the type of increment for the first one and decrement for the second one. So let's just use our decrement. There we go. And now if I save my file, and everything should work the way we expect him to work. So if I click on this button, it will now increment our counter, and if I click on this button, it's gonna decrement our counter. Okay, so yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type for our use reducer. This is a lot of instructions. So basically, you're going to be creating a counter by using the use reducer, and you're going to be also providing the appropriate types to them. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and I'm going to give you my solution. So here, first of all, I'm going to just create like a folder with the name of reducers, and inside there we're going to be defining our counter reducer.ts. And here we're going to be just defining our reducer. So I'll use like counter reducer, and it's going to take the state, and it's going to also take the action. And here inside there, we're going to be using our switch and cases, not like that, but switch and cases like so. So for the switch, we're going to be defining our action.type with the E. And for the first case, we're going to be providing an increment to there. Okay, so if that is set to increment, we are going to be returning the count, and count will be coming from the state.count plus 1. We're going to be only incrementing there. But if the case is set to decrement, so I'll use like decrement, decrement, decrement. So we're going to be returning the count, and let's just get that from the state.count, and let's just write a -1 because we are going to be decrementing there. After that, let's just remove that. After that, we are going to be also providing a default state to it. So for the default, we are going to be only returning our state. Now that's totally done, but we also have to provide a type for the state and also for the action, and we are going to be doing that totally separately. I'll write a type with the name of counter state, and here we're going to be only writing like count, and count will be set to a number. We can also make that as a one-liner. We don't have to split that in multiple lines. We can also write a type for the increment action, which will also take the type, and the type will be set to increment. So let me just write an increment, or you know what, let me just copy that from here. In a lot of time I misspell things, so now let me just duplicate there, and I'm going to change that to the decrement. So I'm going to copy and place there, and also instead of writing an increment counter, I'm going to change that to decrement, decrement action. Now let me make that as a one type, so I'll use like type and make that as a counter action, and that's going to be equals to the increment action or the decrement action. like so. And finally, I'm going to also export this so that we can use them in other file too. I'm going to also export this counter, so I'll just use like export right here. And finally, we're going to be also exporting the first one, so now let me just use export for this one as well. Now it's time to annotate our state with our counter state and also our action with our counter action, like so. So now that's totally done. Now let me go ahead and create my counter.jsx or tsx component. I'll use like counter.tsx inside there. I'm going to use my RAFCE, save my file, go to my app and register that component right here inside my app. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my use reducer. So I'll use like use reducer from the React.js. You would also need to grab our counter reducer and also the counter state. From where? From our counter reducer. So now underneath that we have to define our initial state. For the initial 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 state, we are going to be annotating there with the counter state. And that counter state is coming from this use reducer, which we've already defined. Like count is now set to number. That's going to be equals to the count, and count will be equals to 0. That's totally done. Now we have to use our use reducer to get our dispatch function and also our initial state. So I'll use like use reducer, and here we're going to be passing our counter reducer and then the initial state inside there. Let me destructure my state and also the dispatch out of that use reducer. And now I'm going to create the UI for that, like not a magical UI, but a very simple UI like count. And here we are going to be only using our state.count to see our counter. We're going to be also creating a button. The first one will just increment our counter and the second one will be decrementing our counter. So I'm going to provide the on-click event handler on both of them. So the first one will increment our count, not interface, but increment, INCREMENT, and the second one will be decrementing our counter. Okay, so now let me just go ahead and create the increment and also the decrement counters. Increment, and there's going to be an arrow function, and this arrow function will just dispatch. And here we have. Now the final thing that we are going to be learning in this section is that how we are going to be providing a type for the use effect. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to first of all create my components folder, and I'll just give it the name of like my component.tsx inside there. Let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, go to my app, and use that my component right here. I'm gonna call this save my file and check this out. So here you can see we have our my component, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our use state, because we would need some sort of a state to store our data, and we would also need the use effect as well. Okay, so now we are going to be using that inside our component. So this is how we are going to be doing there. First of all, we are going to be creating our data and then set data, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and we are going to be providing the initial value of null to it. I will also annotate that as a null value. Now that we have to fetch our data, so to fetch our data, you already know how we are going to be fetching our data. So we are going to be using the use effect right here, and now inside there we are going to be passing the callback function and also our empty dependency array. Now the first thing that I want to do is that I want to use my fetch data function. That's going to be coming from this asynchronous function, like so, and inside there we're going to be using our try and catch block. And if we have some sort of an error, so in that situation we are going to be using like console.error, and let's just use like error fetching data. Okay, and we will also specify our error right here. And if that's not the case, so for the try block we are going to be getting our data by using the fetch method, and we are going to be getting our data from this API, which is jsonplaceholder.com and /product, and we are going to be getting only the first product. Okay, so we have to also change the or convert our response to JSON, and we have to store then some sort of a variable like so. And I'm going to also set the data to, set the result to our set data. So this is how we are going to be fetching our data. And now let's just execute this function so that we can successfully fetch this data. So if I save my file, and now if I click on this, it's going to show us all of their stuff right here. Like it's going to give us the ID, the title, and also the description. And we have a few more things like discount percentage and so on and so forth. So for all of that data, we are going to be creating a product type. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to be using, like, first of all, we have to go ahead and create our type right here. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time, but we will just create this type right here. So first of all, we have a product type. It's going to have the ID, title, description, price, discount percentage, rating, stock, brand, category, thumbnail, and images. Okay, So these are all of the data that we are going to be using inside our app. So that's why we now successfully created a type for that. So we can now annotate our stat by using that type. So I'll just provide a type or null. And now that's done, the next thing that I want to do is that I wanted to render all of the data right here inside my UI. So to render that, first of all, we are going to be checking like if you already have the data or not. So if we have the data, in this situation, we are going to be rendering our data. But if we don't have the data, we are going to be using a paragraph. Come on, let's just use our paragraph. And inside this paragraph, you will select loading dot dot dot. Okay, and I'm going to also close my paragraph right here. Okay, so if we have the data, so in that situation, what do I have to do? I'm going to create here another div, and now inside this div we're going to be rendering all of our content. So I'll just use like paragraph, and this paragraph will have the ID, and we will use like data.id. Basically you can also render your data or destructure your data right here if you wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to fast forward the video because this is just a UI stuff and we can totally do that a bit quickly. So I'll just use like data.title. Now if I save my file and check this out, so here you can see we have our ID, we have the title, price, the discount, and so on and so forth, and we also have our thumbnail right here, so which I can copy and place there here. It's going to give us the thumbnail of our product. So if you want to go into like another product, so we can just choose like second one, save our file and refresh this. So now it's going to give us the updated data. I can totally copy that, I can totally render there if I wanted to, but you know what, I guess that's going to look better. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type, or this is how we are going to be creating a type for our use effect. So now we are going to be using a Tailwind CSS inside our React.js project. So if you guys don't know what a Tailwind CSS is, I have a complete course on there which is about like almost 4 hours of content. Plus you are going to be also building 3 amazing responsive projects. So if you care about learning Tailwind CSS, I promise this is going to be the best course for you. So now let's get into it, like how we are going to be using Tailwind CSS inside our React.js project. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to just click on this getting started button. Then I'm going to go into the framework guides. Now we are going to be choosing Vite, and if you want to choose some other framework, you are more than welcome to use that. I'm going to just choose Vite right here. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to create our Vite project. So I'm going to copy that from here, and now I'm going to open my terminal right here. I'll just right click on this, so it's going to paste my command right here. First of all, we are going to be using like npx create Vite project, and I'm going to just give it the name of like my project, and we're going to be using the React.js template. So now you want to go into their project by using a cd command. Now I'm inside their project. I'm going to use like npm i. Let's just use npm i. So it's going to install all of their packages by which your React.js is depends on right here. While it's doing its thing, I'm going to also copy there. So it's going to install a few things like Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and also Auto Prefixer. It's going to also initialize our Tailwind CSS inside our project. Okay, so now that's successfully done. I'm going to just copy there once again. And now let me place it right here. And finally, we have to initialize our Tailwind CSS inside their project by just using npx Tailwind CSS init-p. So I'm going to just hit enter. So it's going to initialize my Tailwind CSS right here. And I'm going to open that by using my VS Code. So now inside there, we have to go into our Tailwind config.js file. So I'll just copy there and place it right here. So now we are inside this Tailwind config.js file. So we have to replace this content with this one right here. Okay, so we only want to provide our index.html file, which is inside the src file, and we want to select like all of these extension right here. Okay, so we just have to replace them, and also we have to go into our index.css file. I'm going to copy that from here, and now let me just go into my index.css file. I'm going to select every single thing and replace that with these 3 directives right here. Now finally, I'm going to copy this h1, and I'm going to go into my app, not app.css but app.jsx. And I'm going to remove every single thing from there. I'll just use my RAFCE and replace their div with this h1. So I'm going to save my file. Now let me use my npm run dev to start my server. So here you can see we're now getting the styling. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the components. Then I'm going to go to the browse component. And now I'm going to just choose this component right here. Okay, so we can totally copy the HTML code. I'm going to just select a few things, like maybe I'm going to just select this div right here and copy there, because I just want to test my code. So I'll just remove that from here, place these divs right here, save my file, check this out, refresh there, and we're not getting anything. Oh, that's because we are using a class instead of class name, so we have to select all of that and change that to the class name instead. So if I save my file and now refresh there, and it has the class of Helen, so I'm going to just remove that, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting these kind of a component. They are not looking that great, but yeah, trust me, you can do a lot of crazy stuff with Tailwind CSS, and I have a complete course on there, and if you want to check that out, here it is. Okay, so yeah, this is how we are going to be using a Tailwind CSS inside our projects. Okay, so time for another challenge, and I guess that's going to be the final challenge for our React.js and TypeScript series. So what you have to do is that you have to fetch your data from this JSON placeholder.type code, and this endpoint will give you a lot of users. So it's going to give you the user data structure like this. You're going to have the ID, and ID will be a number, then we will have a name, name will be a string, username will be a string, email will be a string, and phone will be also a string. So use the use effect to fetch the data, use the use state to store that data, and then finally just render it in some sort of a table or something like that. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And here is my solution. So I'm going to just create my, what the hell, user list.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFCE, save my file, go to my app, and render there right here like user list, like so. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a few states. So we are going to be creating a state for the users like so, and also the set users is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to empty array. Okay, so let's just create an interface for this array. I'm going to place this interface right here. So we have our user, and we have the ID which will be set to number, and the rest of the stuff will be set to string. So we are going to be annotating our state by using this user, and we have to provide our array inside there like so, and we have to close there. Now underneath there we have to use our loading, and then set loading, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to true. And we also have to annotate that as a boolean because we are storing the value of boolean inside there. Now finally we also have to create one for the error, and that's going to be set to the set error, and we have to use our use state one more time, and the initial value will be set to null. Okay, so I'll annotate that like it's going to be either a string or null. Okay, and we have to close this. So that's going to be it for our state. Now we have to fetch our data by using the use effect. So I'm going to be using like use effect, and here we have to specify our callback function. And for this callback function, we're going to be providing our empty dependency array, and we're going to be also creating a function which will allow us to fetch the users like so, and that's going to be an asynchronous function. And inside this function, we're going to be using our try and catch blocks. For the catch, we'll be using like set error, and we have to provide our error an instance of, come on, that error will be the instance of error. If that's the case, we're going to be getting like error.message out of there. But if that's not the case, we're going to be just saying like an error occurred like so. We're going to be also providing the finally state, finally, and for the finally we are going to be setting the loading to false. Okay, and now let me take care of the try block. So for the try block, first of all, we are going to be fetching our data by using the fetch API, and I'm going to specify this URL inside there, and let me just store it in some sort of a variable like response like so. And I'm going to also check if we don't have the response, if the response is not okay. So in that situation, we are going to be throwing a new error which will say like network response was not okay. And if that's not the case, we're going to be getting our data. So I'll use like const data, and we are going to be annotating them by using our user like so. And it's going to be coming from the await and then response.json, and we have to convert our data to the JSON response. We also have to push our data to our user. So we're going to be using like set users, and let's just push our data inside there. So now that's totally done. So I'm going to hide, or you know what, we also have to call this function inside there like so. And now we have to hide this use effect. Now I'm going to be checking. So if loading, so in this situation, we're going to be returning our loader. So I'll just write like div, or I can also write h1, which will say like loading ... And we can also duplicate there and change that to the error. So I'll just change that to the error like so. So I'm going to also render my error inside there. And here we have to just write an error. So if you have some sort of an error, we're going to be displaying there. Now for the UI, I'm going to remove this user list from here, and I'm going to have to change that to a table, and also change this div to the table, and inside this table we are going to be defining our t head. Okay, and inside this t head we have to define our tr. Inside this tr we are going to be defining our th with the name. Let me just duplicate there a few times. We also have to write a username, and we also have to write the email, and finally we have to write the phone. Come on, phone, like so. And underneath this t head we have to write our t body, and inside this t body we are going to be iterating over through all of the users by using this map. It's going to take the user as a as a perimeter, and here we have to specify our tr, and for this tr we are going to be also providing a key which will be a user.id, and here we also have to use our td to render our elements. So I'll use like user.name, and also I'm going to just duplicate that a few times, change that to the name. Yeah, you know what, that was the user id, and this is going to be the name, and we also have to change that to the username, and change this one to the email, and finally change this one to the phone. Now let me save my file and check this out. So here you can see we are now getting the name. It shouldn't be the name. We also have to provide the id. So let's just duplicate that, change that to id. Now let's talk about the Daisy UI. So what is a Daisy UI and how are we going to be using them with React.js? As you can see right here on their landing page, they are saying like Daisy UI is the most popular component library for Tailwind CSS. So if you guys already know what a Tailwind CSS is, you will love Daisy UI. So you can choose different themes if you wanted to, like dark, and we have a cupcake and so on and so forth theme. Okay, so in my case I'm going to only choose this dark theme right here. And inside their landing page you can learn more about that. Like instead of writing all of these Tailwind CSS classes, you no longer have to write all of these Tailwind CSS classes. Now you can use Daisy UI to only write a few classes. It will give you the same result right here. Okay, so you can choose different kind of themes, you can choose a lot of things inside the Daisy UI. And if you guys want me to make a separate course on Daisy UI, I can totally do that, or maybe a crash course. And I want you to notice this animation. These are the themes that you can choose from the Daisy UI, and if you want to learn that, as I said, you can either learn it from their documentation, or if you want me to make a separate course on that, I can totally make a course on that. But now let's talk about how we are going to be using that. To use that, we only have to run this command right here and also just provide there. But first of all, we have to make a Tailwind CSS setup. So I'm gonna go into the Tailwind CSS right here, and I'm gonna go to my framework guides one more time. Then I'll choose the width, and I'm gonna copy them. Then I will open my terminal right here. I'm gonna place this command, but I'm gonna also change the name of that to like something else. DUI would be fine. And I'm gonna hit enter right now. Then I'm gonna go into my DUI component, and now I'm gonna just use npm i to install all of the packages. Now I'm gonna open that in my VS Code, and then I'm gonna install all of that other packages and stuff. So now it's time to install Daisy UI inside our project. So I'm gonna copy that, and now let me just open my terminal right here, and let me just place this command, which is npm i and then Daisy UI at latest. So it's gonna install Daisy UI inside our project. So now that's successfully done. Now I'm gonna select the ESM, and I'm gonna copy this command right here. First of all, let me just copy the import, and then we will go into the tailwind config.js file, which is this tailwind. Come on, where in the world is that? Okay, so I'll just use, oh, I forgot to install my tailwind CSS. I installed this one, but I forgot to install my tailwind CSS, so I'm gonna copy there, and now let me run this command right here. So it's gonna install and configure my tailwind CSS inside my project. Let me just hit enter. So it's gonna initialize my tailwind CSS right here. Now that's successfully done, and we also have to copy there. We have to go into our tailwind config, place there right here, save my file, and we also have to copy these, go to our index.css file and replace them with this component. And yeah, we are totally done with the tailwind CSS, but we also have to copy there. Now we have to go into our tailwind config.js file, which is this file, and I'm gonna just place it right here. And also let me just copy this Daisy UI. We have to go inside the plugins and just place it right here. And now we have to use some sort of a component, so I'll just go ahead and go to the components, and in this case I'm gonna go to the buttons, and I'll just copy the code for that. So maybe I'm gonna go to this one and copy the JSX code from there. Let's just copy there. Now I'm gonna go into my src folder, and then my app component folder. So I'll just replace that with my rafce and remove this div, or you know what, we're going to be just removing the app, and I'm gonna just place all of my code right here. So if I save my file, now let me run my npm run dev. So it's gonna run there right here. And here you can see we are now getting all of these buttons, like just a simple button, and we have a neutral, primary, secondary, ascendant, ghost, and so on and so forth button right here. We can go ahead and do lots of stuff right here, like we can get the model if you wanted to, we can get the accordions if you wanted to, we can do a lot of stuff. Like if I click on there, we can get this model. So I'm going to just copy all of these code, and now let me just replace that with this code right here. So if I save my file, now if I go there, click on there, we are now getting our model. So yeah, this is how we are going to be using a Daisy UI inside our React.js projects. Now let's use another component library which is called Redux inside our React.js project. So here you can see Redux is an open source component library optimized for fast development, easy maintenance, and accessibility. Just import and go on. So here are the live demos. So these are the amount of things that you can do by using the Redux component library. So these are just the themes. We can also go to the primitives, we can check out the icons, we can also go to the colors, and there are a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to go into my Redux one more time, and now to install there, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to make a React.js setup. And now let me show you how we are going to be doing this. So I'll just open my terminal right here, and I'm going to write npm create vite and latest, and if I hit enter, so it's going to ask me for the name. I'm going to give it the name of like Redux project, or demo would be fine. I'll just give it the name of like Redux demo. I'm going to choose React.js as a framework and JavaScript. I'm going to go into the Redux, and I'm going to open that in my VS Code. Let me open my integrated terminal, and I'm going to use npm I to install all of my packages. So now while it's doing there, I'm going to click on this getting started button, and here you can see this is how we are going to be installing there. So we just have to copy this command. I'm going to copy this command right here, and now that's successfully done. So I'm going to just paste this command here and hit enter. Okay, so while it's doing that, I'm going to go into my global main component, and I'm going to just place this command right here. So I'm going to copy there. Now it is doing its thing, and now that's successfully done. So I'll go into my main component, and inside this main component, I'm going to also import the Redux right here. So I'll just save there. Next, we have to go into our main component, and we have to use our theme context. So I'm going to copy that from here, and now I'm going to also import that right here. Okay, so let's just import that. I'm going to wrap my entire application by using this theme context like so. Okay, so let's just close there, hit enter, and wrap my entire application by using this context. So if I just remove that, next we have to use that in some sort of a component. So I'll just copy this component from here, and I'm going to go into my app component, and I'll just remove every single thing from there, and I'm going to use my RAFCE, or you know what, let me just place this component right here, cut that from here, use that right here. I'm going to use my app, copy them, and just change the name of my function to app. So if I save my file, and now I'm going to use npm run dev to start my server, and here you can see we are getting this result right here, which is saying like hello from the Redux theme. And I guess we are not getting that much cool result. That's because we are now getting these stuff right here. So I'm going to remove every single thing from the app.css, and now let me just refresh them. I'm going to also remove every single thing from the index.css as well. And now if I just refresh this, hello from the Redux themes, and let's go. Okay, so this is how we are going to be using a Redux inside our React.js project. Now let's talk about the copy pasta component library, which is called the Shadescene UI. And Shadescene UI is by far the most popular and the most powerful front-end UI library. So to install them, and I'm thinking about making a course on there, but anyways, that's other story. So to install them, I'm going to just click on this getting started button right here. Then I'm going to go into this installation, and I'm going to just choose Vite right here. And first of all, we have to make a setup. So I'm going to copy that from here, open my terminal one more time. Now inside this terminal, I'm going to place this command and hit enter. I'm going to give it the name of like Shadescene demos. And now I'm going to just choose React.js and TypeScript. Now I'm going to go into my Shadescene demos, and come on, cd and then Shadescene demos. And now let me just open there right here, and I'm going to open my terminal one more time and use npm I to install every single package. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to install Tailwind CSS inside our project. So I'm going to copy them, and now we have to use that right here. Okay, so that's done. Now let me place this command right here. So it's going to take a bit of time to install Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and auto prefixer. And also it's going to initialize my Tailwind CSS right here, which is amazing. So the next thing that we have to do is that we have to go into the tsconfig file, and I'm going to copy there. Let's just go ahead and go to the tsconfig. So I'll just provide a comma here. Now let me just place my compiler options, and now let me just save there and close there. Next we have to go into our tsconfig.app.json file. So I'll just write there, hit enter, And now inside there, we only have to provide this base URI and also this path. So I'm going to copy that from there. And now underneath this skip lib check, I'm going to just place my command right here. And now finally we have to install the TypeScript type. So I'm going to copy there, and we also have to install that right here inside our project. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to place all of them into our v.config.ts file. So I'm going to go into my v.ts or whatever file, and now let me just place all of them right here, save my file, and now we have to initialize our Shadson UI. So I'm going to copy them. Now let me open my terminal and place this command, which is Shadson UI, and initialize there, and we are getting some sort of an error. No Tailwind CSS configuration found at this location. It is likely you don't have Tailwind CSS installed or have an invalid configuration. So how is that even possible? We set up every single, oh, there we go. So we have to go into the not Shadson but Tailwind CSS, tailwindcss.com, and here I'm gonna have to copy this content and place there right here, save my file. And we also have to copy these components, and we have to go into the index.css file and place there here, save my file, and now it will work. Okay, so if I just rerun there, and now it's going to initialize my Tailwind CSS right here. I'm going to just choose this New York. Neutral will be fine for the color, and we are not going to be using CSS variables, but I'm going to just set that to yes, and everything will work just fine. Okay, so now that's successfully done. Finally, we have to install something from the Shadson UI. So I'm going to go ahead and install some sort of a component. I'm going to go into maybe button. So this is how the Shadson UI works. It will give you a lot of component to choose from, and let's suppose you choose like button. First of all, you have to install that in your project, and then you would be able to use that. So in this case, I'm going to install my button right here. So I'm going to copy there, and first of all we have to install there, and here you will see a components folder right here, and here you can see we have a components folder. Inside this component folder we have a UI folder, and inside there we have our button right here. We're not going to be playing around with these buttons, but we are going to be just using them. And how are we going to be using them? Let me show you how we can use them. I'm going to go into my app.tsx, and I'm going to remove every single thing from there, and I'm going to just use my RAFCE, and now I want to use that button. Okay, so I'll just use like button right here, and here you can see we have this location like component, UI, and button. Now if I hit enter right here, and now we can just write like whatever I want to write, like learn more. And now if I save my file, run our server by using npm run dev, copy there, place that right here, and here you can see we are now getting our button right here, which is amazing. But that was a huge setup to make. Okay, so we can get like the card, we can get like come on, with the accordion we can get like a lot of stuff. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create my card right here. So I'm going to copy them and run there. First of all, let me just terminate there and install my card inside my project. So it's going to install that card right here. That's successfully done. Now I'm going to go in there and copy all of that content, and I'm going to just copy all of that code right here. Now inside there we just have to use that. Okay, so if I just place this coding right here, you're now getting a lot of stuff, but in this situation I only want to get there. So I will cut that from here and remove all of that stuff from here, and we need all of these imports. So instead of providing this button, I'm going to only provide all of their stuff. So if I save my file, we are getting an input and also the labels. We also have to install there. Okay, so we are getting a button twice. We don't need React.js, and we're now getting these error like we have to install the input, label, and also the select. So I'm going to go ahead and add there. So to add there, we are going to be using that same command, but we only have to change the component name. Like instead of providing a card, I'm going to write like input. I'm going to also provide the label, and also finally we have to add the select. Okay, and if I hit enter right here, so it's going to install there inside my project, and now that's successfully installed. And if I cut this file and open there once again, here you can see those errors are now successfully gone. Okay, so this is how it will look like. But now I'm going to use my npm run dev, and if I just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting our form. So we have our input field, we have also a select statement right here. So yeah, this is how we are going to be using a Shadson UI inside our React.js project. So now let's learn about the React Hook form library, which will allows us to provide easy to use validation for our form. Okay, so I'm going to click on this getting started button, and here you can see this is how we are going to be installing there, and this is how we are going to be using there. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to make a setup. So I'm going to open my terminal right here, and I'm going to be using npm create with add latest, and I'm going to give it the name of like React Hook form demo would be fine, and I'll choose React.js and also TypeScript. Let me go into my React Hook form, and I'm going to use npm-i to install all of the packages. So that's successfully done. I'm going to open there in my VS Code by using a code dot. So it's going to open there right here. I'm going to open my terminal and install the React Hook form package from here. So we just have to write npm install or I, and then we have to write React Hook form, and I'm going to hit enter, so it's going to install there in my project. So here you can see that's done. Now let me just close there, and I'm going to be using npm run dev to run our server. I also made a cleanup, so now it's time to focus on the React Hook form. So I'm going to create a folder with the name of components, and inside them I'm going to create my form.tsx component right here. I'm going to use my RAFCE and register there in my app. Okay, so first of all, we have to just use like form, and we have to import that from the components folder. So now I'm going to save there, and this is how it looks like right here, which is looking amazing. So now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to grab or use form, from where we are going to be grabbing there from the React Hook form. We're going to be getting all of our magic like form validation, form handling, and also the errors from this hook. That is why we call it as a React Hook form. Okay, so we have to also execute there right here. And now from this use form hook, we are going to be destructuring a few things. First of all, we are going to be destructuring the register. We would also need to destructure the handle submit and also the form state, and from this form state we're going to be also nested destructuring the errors and also the is submitting. There we go. So I'm going to save my file, and now let me explain all of that stuff right here. So the first thing that we are destructuring is a register, and register is used to connect input field to the form. Then we have a handle submit, and this is a function which allows us to handle the form submission. Then we have a errors, which contains the validation error for the form, and then we also have a is submitting. So this is basically just a flag, which I'm going to show you in a few seconds. Okay, so yeah, that was just a bit of explanation about the register, handle submit, and errors. So I'm going to remove that from here. Now we are getting this error, so we have to also resolve this error, so which is a TypeScript error. So I'm going to create my interface right here with the name of form data. And inside there we are going to be first of all defining my name, which will be a string, and also the email, which will be a string, and also the password, which will be a string as well. Okay, so I'm going to take this form data right here, and we have to put there or annotate or use hook with this form data. So here you can see that's now successfully done. We are now getting these errors because we have to use these. Okay, so now to use that, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to remove this form from here, and instead of providing this div, I'm going to change that to form, and I'm going to also provide the onSubmit handler to there. And for this onSubmit handler, we are going to be calling this function, which is a handle submit, which we are now importing from this hook. Okay, so we have to provide there. Now inside there we are going to be providing our own custom function, which will be the onSubmit function. And now let me create this onSubmit function right here. Okay, so basically we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but we are going to be just logging to the console or data. Okay, so we have our onSubmit, and it's going to take the data, and now inside there we are going to be just logging that data to the console. That's everything that we have to do. But I'm going to also provide my TypeScript magic right here. So we're going to be using like submit handler. Okay, so now let me just grab that from the React Hook form, and we are going to be annotating there with this form data, which we have already defined right here. So the form submission is now totally done. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our input field so that we can type something inside there. So I'll just create a div, and inside this div I will provide like a label, and for this HTML4 I'll just provide like a name, and I'm going to also provide a name as a label. Now underneath there we're going to be defining our input field right here. It's going to take the type of text, and we're going to be also providing the ID of name to there. Here now we are going to be using our register function. Okay, so I'm going to use dot dot dot, and here we have to call this register function, which is now coming from this use form hook right here. So we are now calling there right here. So the first argument it takes is a name, as you can see right here, like argument name was not provided. Like you can provide the name of name or email or password or anything that you prefer. Then you have to also specify, like you don't have to, but if you wanted to, you can provide a validation data there. So instead of talking about the theory, let me just provide a name right here. Okay, and I'm going to provide a comma, and then we're going to be providing some sort of a validation rules. Okay, so I'll just use like required. This should be required, but if somebody did not specify the name, so we are going to be throwing this error which will say like name is required. Okay, so I'm going to save my file. So this is how we are going to be making a setup for our input field. This is how we are going to be telling our React Hook form that you have to take care of this input field. If somebody did not specify anything inside this input field, so we are going to be providing this error which will say like name is required. Okay, so this is going to be our constraint or our rule, and this is how we are going to be registering there for our React hook form. Now what if somebody did not provide something inside this input field? So we are going to be just throwing some sort of error right here. Okay, so I'm going to use like my curly braces, and inside there we are going to be going into our errors which we are also importing from our use form right here. We are going to be grabbing them, and here we have to use the dot notation. And from where is our error coming from? Our error is coming from this name, so I'm going to select that. So if you got some sort of error, we're going to be using this AND operator. Okay, so then we have to specify or show that error right here. We're going to be using like error dot name, and we are going to be getting the message out of there. Okay, and now here for this paragraph, I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to that. So I'll just use like the color will be now set to totally red. I'm gonna save my file, and now let me just test this out. Here you can see we have our input field, but so you know what, let me also create some sort of a button which will just allows us to submit. I'll just write like type of submit to there, save my file, and now if I didn't specify anything to there and click on the submit, so it's going to give us like name is required. If I just write like, I don't know, maybe ABC, save my file, and now let me click on the submit button one more time, so it's going to give us that ABC right here. This is how we are going to be registering our input field. This is how we are going to be providing a constraint for that, and this is how we are going to be rendering that specific error right here. Okay, so then it's done. I'm going to also remove this button from here. Now let me take care of the email, and also so I'm going to create yet another div, and inside this div, first of all, we have to provide our label which will take an email, and also we have to define our input field, and it's going to take the input or the type of email. Now that we have to tell our React hook form that you have to keep track of this input field, so we are going to be using the register function, and we are going to be providing an email right here, and I'm going to also provide a bit of rule to that, like this will be required. If somebody provide invalid email, so we are going to be writing like email is required. That's going to be the first thing. And now we are going to be also providing our pattern, like what will be the pattern of our email. Okay, so for the value, if you know what a JSX is, cool, but if you don't know what a JSX is, but so this is how it looks like. To be honest, I also don't know what a JSX is. I just copied this snippet from a ChatGPT. So yeah, I'm using that right here. And we also have to specify some sort of a message right here which will say like invalid email address, like so. Now I'm going to save my file. So now that we successfully tell our React hook form that you have to keep track of this input field, and also we are telling it if somebody did not specify nothing inside there, we are going to be showing like email is required, and also if the email is invalid, so we are going to be showing like email is invalid. Now underneath there, I'm going to also provide the ID of email, and the placeholder will also say email right here. I'm going to save my file, but we also have to show those errors. Okay, so to show those errors, we are going to be using like errors.email in this case. And if that is the case, so come on, if that is the case, so we are going to be just creating a div, and now inside this div, we're going to be rendering our error right here, like error email.message, and we also have to change the color of that to like color will be now set to totally red. Like so. I'm gonna save my file, but we cannot see there because we have to create our button which will allows us to submit this form. So I'll just use like submit, and the type will be also set to submit. If I didn't specify nothing to there, and if I click on this submit, it's gonna give us two errors right here. So it's gonna give us like name is required and email is also required. So if I just specify some sort of a name, and for the email I'm gonna write like I don't know, or you know what, test. Yeah, test would be fine. So here you can see we're now getting our invalid email address. So if I use like test@gmail.com, that error is now successfully gone. And now if I click on that, we are no longer getting that error. This is how we are going to be keeping track of that. Now outside from this div, we are going to be creating yet another div. Okay, so I'll just create a div for what do we call for the password. So I'll just create an input field with the type of password. And here we have to specify first of all our register function, so that we have to tell our React hook form that you also have to keep track of this input field, and we're going to be providing our password to there, and also the minimum length will be value. Let's just provide a value, and the minimum length will be 8 characters. If the password length is less than 8 characters, so we're going to be showing this error like password must be at least 8 characters. And now outside from there, we are going to be also providing our placeholder, and the placeholder will be just a password like so. So if I save my file, and now underneath there I'm going to also render my errors right here. So if you have some sort of an error inside the password, so we are going to be showing that error, and we are going to be also providing a color of red to that. So here you can see we have our name, email, and also the password, and we can also provide a label for that, but I guess like we don't have to. And now we are going to be creating our button, which will just say submit. And now we are going to be also providing a type of submit to that. So if I save my file, now let me just fill this form. So I'm going to just provide like the name of Hussein and test@gmail.com, and I'm going to only provide like 1 2 3. And now if I click on submit, so it's going to give us that error like password must be at least 8 characters. If I write like 4 5, still 7 8 9 10, and here you can see that it is now successfully gone. So yeah, this is how we're going to be working with the validation or the React hook form library, but I'm going to also show you the disable state. If you want to disable this button on the form submitting state, so for that we can use the disable, come on, not this one, the disable, and here we have to specify the is submitting. So it's going to give us a boolean value. So if our form is submitting, so the button will be disabled, but if our form is not submitting, it's going to give us a false, and our button will no longer be disabled. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And I'm going to also change the text of that to like if it is submitting, let me just use like if it is submitting. So in that situation we're going to be using like loading ... and if that's not the case, we're going to be using submit. Now let me just save my file, and now I'm going to just write like Hussein and this email, and also I'll just provide some sort of a random password. And here you can see if I click on that you cannot see that because that's super quick, so you cannot see that. In the production you will see that. So yeah, that was just the basics of React hook form library. Now let me give you one more example of the React hook form. So if you care about that, you can totally watch that, or if you don't, so you can go ahead and jump to the next section. And now let's just create another form which will be a bit of advanced form. It's not that much advanced, to be honest. Like, we're not going to be learning anything new, but this form is only for the practice. Okay, so let's just save there and go ahead and go to our app, advanced form right here, register there, save my file. And I'm going to also go ahead and go to my src folder and use my style.css right here. And I'm going to provide all of the CSS which you can find on my GitHub repository. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create a bit of advanced form, not that much advanced to be honest, but the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our use form from where? From the React hook form. We would also need to grab the submit handler from this React hook form, and we also have to import our styling. So we are going to be using like style.css, save my file, and this is how it looks like right here, which is looking amazing. Now let me provide an interface of the form data. So we are going to be providing like first name, last name, email, city, state, zip code, country, and complete location. Okay, so I'm going to use that inside my component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use my use form once again. From this use form, we are going to be destructuring a few things. We would just destructure our register, which will allow us to register our input field. We would also need our handle submit whenever we are submitting our data, and we will also need a few state from this component. So we will just need like the errors. That's gonna be it. Now let me just annotate my form data right here so that we don't get those errors. So that's cool. Now I'm gonna just remove that from here and change this one to the form. So I'll use like, or you know what, we're not gonna do that. We are not gonna do that. Okay, let's just put a class name of form container, and inside this div we're going to be creating our h2, which will say like registration form. And now underneath there we're going to be creating our form. It's not going to take any action, but we are going to be providing our on submit handler, and whenever we are submitting this, we are going to be using the handle submit from the React hook form. And let's just provide our on submit function to there. So I'll use like on submit, and let's just create our on submit right here. So basically we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but we are going to be just logging all of that data to the console. So I'll just use like on submit, and whenever we are submitting there, we are going to be using our submit handler, and let's just provide our form data to there, and that's going to be equals to this data. We are going to be taking that data as a parameter, and then we are going to be logging that data to the console. And now inside this form, what I want to do, I want to create a div. Inside this div, let's just provide our label, which will say like first name, and it's going to take like a first name as a label. We're going to be also providing our input field, and the ID will be set to first name like so. And we're going to be also providing our register. So I'll use like register, and here we have to use our first name And now for the next parameter, we have to provide our patterns. So I'll use, or not a pattern, but our constraints. So I'll use like required, and that should be required. We have to provide like first name is required. There we go. Save my file. Let's just go back, and this is how it looks like. And now underneath there, we are going to be also rendering our errors. So if you have some sort of errors inside our first name, so in that situation, we're going to be rendering our paragraph, which will say like errors first name dot message. So we are going to be just basically grabbing the message from there. So that's done. Now underneath this div, we are going to be defining yet another div. Okay, so inside that div, we're going to be defining our label, which will say like last name, and inside there, let's just provide our last name right here. We're going to be also providing our input field with the type of text and the ID of last name to there. And now we have to register that, so we are going to be using our register function. Let's just provide our last name inside there, and here that's going to be required, so we also have to provide our required. Okay, so I'll use like last name is required. There we go. And finally, we have to render those errors. We are going to be using like errors dot last name, and let's just render our paragraph right here. And inside this paragraph, we are going to be using like errors dot last name dot message. There we go. Next, we also have to take care of the email. So let's just create our label for the email in lowercase email like so. And we are going to be providing our input field. And for this input field, we are going to be providing a type of email, the ID of email, and also let's just register there right here. Okay, so I'm going to be using like email, and inside there, let's just require there by providing an email address is required, and this should be double D. I'm going to also provide my pattern, and for the value of this pattern, we are going to be passing this pattern, which I copied from the ChatGPT, to be honest. Okay, and we are going to be also providing a message which will say like invalid email address. We also have to render our errors, so I'm going to be using like errors.email, and we have to render our errors by using our paragraphs. So I'm going to be using like errors.email and then dot message. Now outside from there, we are going to be creating a div one more time, and inside there, let's just create our label for the city. Come on, city, and let's just also provide our city here, and also the ID will be set to city, and let's just register there by using dot 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 register function. We have to provide our city, and also that's going to be required. Okay, so if that is required, so we are going to be using like city is required. There we go. And also let's just render our errors by using errors errors.city. God damn it, why the hell am I not getting there? Errors.city, and if we have some sort of error coming from the city, we're going to be rendering our errors.city.message. There we go. That's gonna be a lot of typing. We have to create another div and also provide our label, and label will say state, and also provide our state here. For the input field, we are going to be providing text obviously, and ID will be set to state. Then it's going to be required, and we are going to be providing what state inside, not required, but that's going to be registered. We have to register that here. Okay, so it's going to take the state, and that is going to be required. There we go. So state is required. Now underneath this input field, we have to use our errors.state one more time, and I'm going to use my AND operator and provide my paragraph and change that to errors.state.message. And now outside from there, I guess I have to just duplicate that like a few times. So I'm going to create for the zip code, next for the country, and also one for the complete location. Okay, so now here that's going to be it for the state. We also have to create one more for the zip, so I'll just change that to a zip like so. Change this one to zip, or in uppercase zip. The ID will be set to zip, and the state will also be zip, and zip is required. Next we have to create a country, so I'll provide like country, and here we have to provide a country as a label, and ID will be set to country. The register, we are going to be registering our country, and country is required like so. And the final one that we have is a complete location, so I'll just write like complete location, LOCATION, and here we also have to provide our complete location. And for this text, I'm going to also copy them and place it here and place it here as well. And complete location is required, so I'll use like complete location is required. And we did not change the state, so instead of providing a state for all of them, I'm gonna change that to zip, change this one to country, and also this one to the complete location right here. So now if I hit enter, oh, I also have to change this value right here. So I'm gonna copy that, place that here. I'm gonna also copy the country, place that to the state, and the complete location will also be here. Okay, so now finally if I save my file, and now let's just test this out. So here you can see we are now getting our form button, which will just say submit, and we are going to be also providing a type of submit to the save my file, and we are now getting our button right here. So if I didn't specify nothing to there and click on a submit, so it's going to give us these warnings. It's going to say like first name is required, last name is required, email address is required, city and state is required, zip, country, and complete is required, complete location is required. What the hell? Complete location is required. So it's going to give us like a complete location is required. So I'll provide like my own name, Hussein, last name is set to webdev, and provide an email as a test@gmail.com, and also the city will be something, state will be, I don't know, the zip code will be 4312, and country will be and complete location will be god damn it, I'm gonna copy this something, then I don't know, then the zip code will be 5312, and also the country is, yeah. And now if I click on the submit button, we are not getting anything, but we can also go ahead and go to the inspect element. We can see all of that content right here. So we are getting these errors, and now if I, let me just refresh there, click on submit one more time, and now we are getting all of that data like city, complete location, country, email, first name, last name, state, and zip. So yeah, that was a lot about the React hook form that we've learned. So if you have a spare time, you can definitely go ahead and do some other stuff with them. But yeah, I am done with the React hook form. Welcome to the React 19 masterclass. So in this section, we are going to be covering every single thing that there is to learn about the React 19. And keep in mind, I'm going to be also making a separate video about the React 19 because I know there are a lot more features coming in the React 19, and I cannot cover that right now because they are not even released yet. I've met with a lot of meta developer, and they tell me about a certain features which are coming into the React 19, but not right now, but I promise they are coming. So yeah, now let's talk about the biggest feature about the React 19, which is their own compilers. React 19 now includes its own compiler, which will not only speed up the performance, but also automate a certain tedious task, reducing the overload for developers. So yeah, we have a new compiler, hooray! Next, we no longer have to care about the memoization and the memorization and stuff like that. With React 19 new compiler, there is no need for the memorization or memoization. The process of optimizing a component to prevent unnecessary re-renders. Previously, we relied on the use memo and also on the use callback hook for these purposes, but now thankfully they are totally obsolete because of the React 19 compiler. We also have another feature in React 19 which is called the metadata. So we no longer need to install third-party packages for SEO and metadata because React 19 now offers built-in support for these features. We can place the tags anywhere within our component, and that will work totally fine in the client component and also on the server component. So yeah, that's also a big thing. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, which is called the directives. So React 19 now includes built-in support for the use client and also the use server directives. We are not going to be covering the use server one because it involves some sort of a backend functionality, but we are not going to be covering that, not right now, but I will make a separate video about this. Allow component to be rendered on the server, resulting in improved SEO, faster page load time, and more straightforward data fetching. So yeah, that was a few things, but now let's talk about what are the things which are now completely obsolete in the React 19. So we no longer have to worry about the forward ref. We also have to don't care about the React lazy loading and also the use context. I mean, like, yeah, we totally can use the use context, like nothing is stopping us, but we are not going to be using the use context. We are going to be only using use. That's it, which is something I'm going to be showing you in a few seconds. We no longer have to care about the memo, the use effect, and also the use callback. We are going to be using the use effect for the side effects, but not for the data fetching. So yeah, that was a few things, but now let's talk about the use. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, where in the world is Hossein getting these amazing wallpapers? I'm gonna show you from where, but first we have to make a setup for our course. Let's just make a setup for this course. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to install React. I'll use like npm create read at latest, and then I'll get the name of like React 19 features or something like that. I'm gonna choose React.js and also TypeScript. So now let's get into the React.js, and now we are going to be using npm-i to install every single thing inside there. That's done. Now React.js, by the time of this recording, React 19 version is not available, so we're going to be using the experimentals. So you just have to provide this command. So now let me just place there. So first of all, you have to use npm-i, then React add experimental, and also React DOM add experimental. So I'm gonna hit enter. So it's gonna also install there inside their project. So now let me just open there in my VS Code, and this is how it looks like. So I'm gonna remove the public folder. I'm gonna also go into the src and remove this assets folder, remove the app.css file, and let's just empty out this app.tsx, and I'm going to only write my rafce inside there, save my file, and also I'm going to remove every single thing from this index.css file. And now I'm going to go into the tailwindcss.com, click on the getting started, go to the framework and guides, choose read, and copy this command, open my terminal, place that here, and it's going to install Tailwind CSS inside my project. I'm going to also hit enter, so it's going to initialize Tailwind CSS inside my project. So I'm going to copy there, and let's just go into our Tailwind config and replace that with this new content. Okay, and finally we also have to copy this index.css stuff and place that here, and we have to run there by using npm run dev. Check this out. So I'll use like localhost, and yep, everything is working the way I expect them to work. So now let's talk about the use hook in React 19. So the use hook lets you read and load resources asynchronously, such as promises or context. So unlike any other hook, we can use the use hook inside the loops, and we can also use them inside the conditional statement. In certain situations, it can serve as a replacement for the use effect when fetching the data, something which I'm going to be showing you in a few seconds. And it also streamlines the context usage by allowing you to use the use context, like just use the use and then provide your context inside there, instead of using the use context hook and then providing your context. So yeah, that's just a theory about the use hook. And now let's write some code, and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. I fast forward the video and created a component folder, and inside there we have our fetch-to-do.tsx file. And now inside this file we are now fetching our data. So now let me just show you every single thing. First of all, we are importing the use state and also the use effect. Then we are creating an interface for our to-do, which will only hold the title, and title will be a string. Then we have our component with the name of fetch to do, and inside there we have a to do state, which will allows us to store our to dos inside this state. Next, we also have a loading state, which will allows us to either show the loading or hide the loading. Then for the side effect, we are now using the use effect, and inside this use effect we are now fetching our data. Okay, so we are now creating a function with the name of fetch data, which is going to be an asynchronous function, and inside this function we are now providing a try and catch block. So first of all, we are going to be fetching our data from this URL. If we don't have the data, so we are going to be throwing this response. But if we do have the data, so we are going to be converting that to JSON. Finally, we have to send that to our to do so that we can render there. If that's not the case, we are going to be getting some sort of an error which we are logging to the console. And if that's also not the case, we are going to be providing our loader. Finally, we are just calling our function to get all of the data. So now let me just collapse them. We are also checking if we have the loading. So we are going to be showing this loader. And if that's not the case, so finally we have to just render our title from this to do. So yeah, that was our entire component. And now if you want to execute or call that component inside our app, so this is how we are going to be doing there. And now I'm going to render this component right here. So I'll use like fetch to do, and let's just close that like so. I'm going to try to import there. So this is how we are going to be importing this. So let's just save our file. And here you can see we're now getting our title right here, which is a random to do title, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. But we no longer have to write like all of that code, like using the use effect and using the if and else statement and all of that crap. We have to just remove them. And the first thing that we have to do is that we have to just use our component right here, which is a fetch to do component. And inside this fetch to do, first of all, we are going to be creating a variable with the name of data. And inside this data, we are going to be using the use. And where in the word is use coming from? Use will be coming from the React.js. So I'll just import the use from the React.js. Okay, so this is how we are going to be importing the use function or the use hook from the React.js. And now inside this use, we have to specify our promise. So I'll just provide a function which will be a fetch data function. And now we have to create this function separately. We can also provide our function right here if you wanted to. So I'll just create my function separately with the name of like fetch data. And inside this function, what do you want to do? Let's just write our asynchronous function. And inside this function, we're going to be making a request to this URL, which is https and then json placeholder dot type iCloud.com and then todos and one. Okay, so we're going to be storing that in the res variable, and now we have to just return the res.json. Okay, like so. Now that we successfully fetch our data, now we are providing that to our use function. Next, we have to render the data to the DOM. So I'll just remove this fetch to do from here, and I'm going to only use data dot and then title. So if I use this, save my file, this also is going to give us an error. And why is that? Because whenever we want to use the use function or the hook, we have to wrap that inside the suspense. So I'm going to just select this div, and we have to convert that to suspense like so. Suspense is a huge topic which we are going to be covering in this course, but not right now. Okay, and here you can see we're now getting our title, which is looking cool. So yeah, this is how we are going to be fetching our data by using the use hook. So now let me just show you that once again. First of all, we are going to be importing the use hook, and inside this use hook, we're going to be providing our promise. Okay, so here we're now providing our fetch data function, and now we're creating that fetch data function. And inside this fetch data function, we are now fetching our data from this URL, and then we are converting the data to our JSON. Okay, so this is how it's going to allow us to fetch the data, and this is how we are going to be showing the data to the DOM. Now let me show you how we are going to be using the use hook with context. So first of all, I have my app component, and inside this app component, I am now rendering my theme component. So now let me go ahead and go to my theme, and whoa, that's a lot of coding, Hussein. That's a lot of coding. So now let me just explain all of them one by one. First of all, we are defining a type for our theme. It's going to be either a light or a dark theme, and then we are creating an interface. And then inside this interface, we have a theme which will be coming from that theme, like either the light or the dark theme. Then we have a toggle function which will only return the white. Then we are creating our context, and this context will either take the theme context type or undefined. So for the initial value, we are now specifying undefined to there. Now we are creating our provider, and inside this provider is going to take a children. So we are now just annotating there right here. And now inside there, we are now creating our theme, which will be shareable for all of our components. So we are now just creating a straightforward theme, and the initial value will be set to light. We are also creating a toggle theme function, which will allow us to either provide the light or dark, or toggle that to either a light or dark theme. Then we are just passing the theme and also the toggle theme function to our context provider, like theme context provider to be precise. And here you can see we have our theme component, and now inside this theme component, we are now wrapping our card component by using our theme provider. Okay, and finally we are just creating a custom hook, which is a use theme, and we are checking if we have the context. So cool, get the context. But if you don't have the context, then show this error like use theme must be within the theme provider component. So that's everything for this component. Now let me go ahead and go to my card component, and we are not doing anything crazy, but we are first of all importing our context from theme context, and we are now passing them to the use context. And if you don't have the context, so then we're going to be rendering this error. So if we have the context, so we're going to be destructuring the theme and also the toggle theme function from there. We're providing a bit of styling to there, and we are now rendering our theme totally dynamically. So if our theme is equal to light, then we're going to be changing the background color to totally white. But if that's not the case, we're going to be changing the background color to kind of a tealish color. Okay, and we are also providing our h1, providing our styling totally dynamically, and also we are creating some sort of a paragraph and providing our style to them. And finally we have our button, which will allow us to toggle our theme. So this is how the UI will look like. As you can see, I have this UI. I have this theme card and also some sort of a lorem ipsum. If I click on this switch to dark mode, it's going to make it as a dark mode. If I click on there once again, so it's going to make it totally light mode. So yeah, this is what's going on. Now using the React 19 version, we no longer have to use, what do we call it, this use context. So now we can totally replace that with the use function. So how are we going to be doing there? I'm going to comment this line out, and I'm going to be importing the use function or hook from where? From the React.js. And now we no longer have to use the use context. We're going to be only using the use. Okay, so now if I save my file, test this out and click on there, still it works exactly the same. So yeah, that's the only change that we have to do for the React 19. So now let's talk about the actions in React 19. React 19 introduces actions, which are asynchronous function designed to simplify form submissions. Actions can be utilized on both client and also on the server side. So yeah, that's just a basic theory about the actions. Now let's get into the coding part and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about actions in React 19. But first of all, I want to say that we're going to be only covering actions on the client side. We're not going to be covering them on the server side because we did not learn about the backend. So that's why we're not going to be covering them not right now, but we will cover them very soon. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside there, we're going to be defining our form.jsx file. Or you know what, this should be a tsx rather. So now let me just change that to tsx. I'm going to use my RAFC component and go into my app and register my component right here. So let's just create our form and register this component, and here you can see we are now getting our form. So first of all, I'm going to provide my UI to there, and then we will provide the rest of the stuff. So I'll change this div to a form, and now inside this form we're going to be creating a label, and this label will be a name label. So I'll just write like label for the name, and we're going to be also providing an input field with the type of text, and we're going to be also providing an ID, and the ID will be set to name. And please do not forget this one, you have to specify a name if you want to work with the form. Okay, so you have to specify some sort of a name for your input field. So I'll just write like name for this one, and now I'm going to save them. So now underneath this one, we're going to be also creating, let me just write a BR right here. So we're going to be also creating a label for the email. I'll write like label, and I'm going to just write like email and also email there. Now let me just provide my input field with the type of, you know what, email would be fine. So I'll just change that to email. I'll also provide my ID of email, and once again, I can't stress that enough, you have to specify the name if you are working with the actions. So we have to specify some sort of a name for that. And yeah, now underneath this one, we're going to be creating our BR once again, and let's just create one more label and also an input field for the password. So I'll just write like password and then password inside there. So I'll just use my input field with the type of password in this case, and we're going to be also providing an ID, and the ID will take a password. And once again, we're going to be providing a name, and the name will be password. So now underneath there, let's just create our button which allows us to submit our form. So I'll just write a BR, and now we're going to be creating a button for the submit. So I'll just provide a type, and the type will be submit. Okay, and yeah, I'm gonna just save this file. This is how my form looks like. I know it is looking super ugly. So now let me just provide a bit of styling to there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to provide the styling to this input field, to this input field, and also to this input field. We're going to be also providing a different styling for this submit button. So now let me just place this. So now if I save my file and check this out, so here you can see this is how my UI looks like. I know, super amazing, right? Yeah, it is amazing. So let's talk about the forms. So as I said, that forms are just an asynchronous function which we are going to be attaching for our form. So what we have to do, I mean like action or asynchronous function which we are going to be attaching for our form. I don't know what the hell I just said in the first place. So I'll just use like action. We just have to specify our action and change the to the PHP code. If you guys are aware of a PHP code, you guys already know all of that stuff, but if you don't, you don't have to worry about that. So here we have to specify some sort of a arrow function or some sort of a function. So I'll use like form action function, and this should be action form action function, and now I'm gonna copy them, and now let me just create that right here. So I'll use like const form action, and it's gonna take a special parameter which will be a form data. Okay, so now inside them, what do we have to do? We have to create some sort of a user data. So I'll use like const user data. It's going to be equals to this object, and now I'm going to provide the property of name to them, and that data will be coming from this form data. We are now attaching this function to this form by using our action. Then we are providing this parameter which is a form data. So now we are going to be copying and pasting there, and then we have a property inside there. So if I just use the dot get, and here we can now get our data. So where in the world is this name coming from? This name is coming from this name which we are now providing right here. Okay, so it's going to select that name form or that name input to be precise. Now I'm going to provide a comma. I'm going to also provide an email, and for the email we're going to be providing our form data dot get method once again, and now we're going to be providing our email, and finally we have to also create that for the password. So I'll use like form data and then get method and provide our password, in this case password. There we go. Now I'm going to save my file, and now underneath them we have to just log to the console this user data, and now let me just save them. It is giving us an error, and you know what, let me just provide like any type to there. So yeah, we are now getting all of their data. So you know what, let's just go ahead and check this out. And now if I open my console, let's just go ahead and go to our console, and I am going to provide my name like Hussein, and then something or test@gmail.com and some random password. And now if I click on the submit button, it's going to give us that data right here. As you can see, I have my name data, I have my email data, and I also have my password data. So now you are totally free to do whatever you want to do with that data. You can totally modify that, you can send that to a server, you can do whatever you want to do with that data. So now let me just explain that once again. First of all, we are going to be creating some sort of a form, and then we have to specify some sort of a name for our input field so that we can select that specific input field by that specific name. We also have to use our action, and for this action we are going to be providing some sort of a function. So you can pass your function right here, or you can create this separately as I did right here. Okay, so now inside this function is going to take this form data as a parameter, and you can totally get your data by using this form data.get method, and here you have to specify your name. Okay, and then you can do whatever you want to do with that data. So yeah, that was just the basics of actions in React.js on the client side. We're not going to be covering the server side because we are not there yet. Now let's talk about the useForm status hook in React 19. So useForm status is a hook that gives you a status information about the last form submission. And this is how the syntax will look like. First of all, we are going to be using the useForm status, like we are going to be executing our hook, and then we are going to be destructuring the pending, data, method, and also the action. Totally self-explanatory. So now let me just write some code, then you will get to know what a useForm status is. So now let's talk about the most easy, a bit weird, and also not that much useful hook in React 19, which is called the useForm hook. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and I'm going to create my form.tsx inside there. And let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, and register this component right here. Okay, so I'll use like form and hit enter, so it's going to give us that form right in here, which is looking cool. So let's just remove them. And first thing first, I'm going to just remove them and change that to a form. And inside this form, we are going to be creating our div, and inside this div we have to provide our label, and for this label we have to provide some sort of a label like name or something. And now underneath there, we are going to be also creating an input field with a type of text. We're going to be also providing a class of border. All around will be, or not, yeah, all around will be set to 2, and the ID will be set to name, and we're going to be also providing a specific name because we're going to be using our action inside there, and this should be required. And now underneath this div, we're going to be defining yet another div. So let's just use our div and provide my label inside there, and we have to specify the email and email like so. Okay, so inside there we have to specify our input with a type of email, and we are going to be also providing a ID, and the ID will be an email. We also have to specify the name, and the name will be an email and this should be required too. And finally, we are going to be creating a button, but we are going to be creating there in a separate component, which will be a form button. Okay, so that's why I said that form status hook is a bit weird one, because whenever we have to use that function, we have to create a separate component, or use that hook, we have to create a separate component for that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and define or create my component right here with the name of form button.tsx. I'm going to only use my RAFCE inside there, and just call this function, save my file, import this component right here. Now I'm going to also create an action for my form, so I'll use like action, and here we have to specify some sort of action, so I'll give it the name of like my action. I'm gonna copy them, and let's just create this action right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna just create my action, and this should be an asynchronous action. Here we have to specify our form data, and inside this form data we're going to be using like await and then new promise, and that's the only reason we marked it as an asynchronous component, or action to be precise. And inside this promise we have to provide a resolve, and when this is resolved we are going to be firing this function, which is a set timeout, and here we have to specify the resolve function to them, and also we have to provide the delay of 2000. Now underneath there we are going to be getting our data, so I'll use like new post, or post rather, and inside there we are going to be first of all getting the name, and name will be coming from the form data, and then we have to use the get method to get the data by using our name. I'm going to also duplicate and change that to email, and also change this one to email as well. And now I'm going to be using like console.log of new post, and now let me just save my file. We are now getting this error, so I'll just annotate there with the any flag. Now this component is done. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my form button component, and now let's just use our form status hook inside there. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my use form status. We have to grab them manually from where? From the React DOM, not from the React.js, but from the React DOM, like so. Now that we successfully get there, so now I'm going to be using this. So I'll use like use form status and execute there. I'm going to store there in some sort of variable like form or something. Now let me just log this form to the console. So now if I save my file, and now I'm going to go ahead and go to my console, and here you can see we're now getting an object. And so now if I just refresh there, so we have an action which we can provide for our form. We are not interested in there. We can also have a data which we can also render inside our component. We're not interested in there. We also have a different methods. I'm not quite sure what in the word is a method, but yeah, we have this flag which is a pending. So now it is giving us a status of our form. Okay, so we are now only interested in this pending. So I'm going to just destructure there. So to destructure there, I'm going to only use this bracket, and I'm going to use like pending inside there. Okay, so now if I just use like pending, save my file once again and refresh there, and now it's going to give us false right here. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove there and change there with a button component or just a simple button, and we also want to provide a type, and the type will be set to submit, and here we have to specify our flag. So I'll just use like, if that is pending, then make this component disable, but if that's not pending, so then we can just do whatever we want to do with it. And I'm going to also provide like, if we have a pending state, so in that situation we can just use like submitting ... but if that's not the case, so we can just write like submit, like so, submit. There we go. So now if I save my file and test this out, so now let me just refresh there, and yeah, you know what, let me just go ahead and provide a style to this one. I'll copy this style and place there right here inside this input field. So now both of them are looking cool. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to specify Hussein and test at gmail.com, and now if I click on this submit and watch what happened, it is now giving us a submitting, and then it will submit their data. It's going to give us all of their data right here, and then it will give us their submit. Let me just try that once again. Okay, so I'll use like something and then something at gmail.com. There we go. So now if I click on there once again, let me just clear this out. If I click on there once again, here you can see it is now giving us a submitting, and then it's going to give us that data, and then it's going to give us that submit. I don't know why we are getting this error, but we are getting that. So this hook will only give us the status about our form. So now in this case, we are now only interested in the pending state, so we can totally use that. Now let's talk about the use action hook in React 19. So when I was recording this video, this hook used to be a use form state hook, but this is no longer a use form state hook. This is a use action state hook. So that's the only reason I'm going to be making a separate video about the React 19 features, because I know there will be a lot of changes and I can totally guarantee that. So now let's talk about it. So what is a use action state? So use action state is a hook that allow you to update the state based on the result of a form action, and this is how the syntax will look like. First of all, we are going to be calling our use action state. We can provide the function. We can also provide the initial value, and now it's going to give us the return value of array. And now inside this array, we can totally destructure the state and also the form action which we can provide for our form. So this is the theory, and now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So now let's talk about the use action state hook in React 19. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside there we are going to be providing our count.tsx. And now inside there, let's just use our arrayfce and register this component right in here, like my counter or just a count, and execute there. And here you can see we're now getting our count, which is looking cool. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to call my use action state hook. So I'll use like use action, and then come on, use action state hook, and now we are going to be grabbing that from the React.js. So I'll import that by using import and then use action. Come on, action state. It is still not giving me a suggestion, so we are going to be grabbing that from the React.js. Okay, import. There we go. So now if I save my file, still we are getting this error. I don't know why, but we are getting this error. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to explain that, but I want you to give me a few seconds because it takes a lot of things. We are going to be destructuring the state and also the form action which we can provide for our form. Okay, so we're going to be destructuring the state and also the form action, and for the initial value we're going to be specifying first of all the increment function which will allows us to change our form, and we can also specify initial value, and the initial value will be like basically anything you want to provide. I'm going to only provide 0 for the initial value. So let me just explain that once again. First of all, we are going to be providing some sort of a function which will allow us to change our data or our initial state or just our state. Then we can provide an initial value for our state, and it can be anything. You can provide a string, you can provide an object, you can provide array, you can provide anything that you prefer. But now in this case, I'm now creating a counter. So I'm now specifying a 0 value inside there. Okay, and we are going to be destructuring the state. It will be holding the value of 0 inside there, which means like we are now destructuring there so that we can use there inside our UI. Then we have an action, and you already learned like what is the action. So I'm gonna also show you that in a few seconds, which means like we're going to be using the inside our form. So now let me just save there, and I'm going to change that to a form once again, and also change this one to a form. So now let's just remove this count from here, and I'm going to be using my h1. Come on, this h1, and I'll just say like I'll just render my state inside there, but it will give me an error, and you guessed it, why it will give us an error. So I'll just provide a styling of like text3xl. It's going to give us an error because we have to create this function right here, or this action, whatever you want to call that. So I'll just use like async flag and create my function inside there like so, and the name will be increment. So it's going to take a few parameter. Now let me provide like previous state, and it's going to also get the form data. If you don't want to provide this previous state, you don't have to, but if you want to get the data, you have to specify the form data to there. Okay, so I want to use my previous state, so it's going to also give us a previous state right here. So now if I want to log to the console my data, so I'm going to be using like form data dot get method, and here we have to specify the name inside there. And why is there? Oh, we did not create our we did not create our input field, but yeah, we are going to be getting our data by using this name. And also let's just use our return statement, and here we have to specify our previous state plus 1. Okay, so now I'm going to save my file. I know it is giving us a lot of errors, but we don't have to worry about the errors right now. We only have to care about this use form actions. So this is how we are going to be rendering our data. And now let me show you. So here you can see we're now getting the initial value of 0 because we are providing a 0 to there. But if I change that to this number and save my file, and now let me just refresh there, and here you can see it's going to give us that number right here. So I'm going to make that as a 0 right here once again. And now we have to create our button which will allows us to increment or change our state. So I'll use like button, and inside this button I'll provide my increment flag right here. And also I'm going to provide a bit of styling, like background will be set to totally teal of 300, and also padding will be set to 2. And I'm going to be using my form action inside there, and here we have to specify our form action, okay, which we are providing right here. I'm going to provide my br, so I'll use like br, and now underneath there we have to create our input field, and the type will be set to text. We're going to be also providing a placeholder, and I'll just say like please enter your name, enter your name like so. And also I'm going to provide a bit of classes to it, so like border will be set to 2 pixel all around. And now let me just use that name. And what did I provide right here? We are now getting our data by using this name, so we have to specify that name. Come on, name right here. So now if I save my file, test this out, and here you can see we're now getting a lot of weirdness. But now let me just refresh there, and yeah, if I click on this increment function, so it's gonna allows us to increment our counter. And if I type something inside there and click on this increment, it's gonna also give us the data inside there. So yeah, that was our use action state. Let me just explain that once again. This function will take an increment function or some sort of a function which will allows us to change our initial value, and this is how we are going to be providing an initial value to there. It's going to give us a state which we can render inside our UI. It's going to also give us a form action which we can execute on our specific button or on our specific action. Okay, so this is how we are going to be creating our increment function. It's going to take a previous state, and it's going to also take a form data, and now we are logging that data to our console, and we are also just incrementing our counter by 1. And yeah, that was just it about the use action state in React 19. Okay, so now let's talk about the use transition hook in React.js. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside there we're going to be creating a lot of components. So I'll use like home.tsx. I'm going to also use the contact.tsx, and also the post.tsx. So I'll use my RAFCE inside this component. RAFCE, 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 give me a Pepsi, or what? What the fuck am I saying? So let's just create our state. So I'll use like active tab, and then set active tab, and it's going to be equals to this function which is a use state function, and the initial value will be set to home. and now we have to create a function which will allows us to render our content. So I'll use like render content, and here we're going to be just creating a function, and here we just have to use our switch and cases, baby. So I'll use like active tab, and for the active tab case we're going to be providing a home, and now we're going to be returning the home component from there. Okay, so let's just import there, remove this break from here, and also provide a case for the post like so, and return the post. There we go, and I'm gonna also close that. Now we also have to use the case, and the case will be set for the contact, and if that's the case, so we're going to be returning the contact component. And first I want to give you the example without using the use transition hook, and then we're going to be refactoring that hook. Then we're going to be refactoring that code to use the use transition hook. So now I'll use like home and import there right here. Okay, everything is working the way we expect him to work. And now we have to create our UI. So I'm gonna go ahead and create my UI right here. I'll use first of all my div with the class of tabs, and inside there we have to create our button, and I'll just use like home and then change that to post and then change that to contact. And now I'm going to be calling my function on there, so when somebody try to click on this function, we are going to be firing these functions. So like set active tab, and let's just provide our tabs inside there. So I'll use like home. I'm going to also provide a post inside there, and I'm going to also provide a contact. So now if I save my file, and underneath there we are going to be rendering our content. So I'll just create a div with the class of content, god damn it, content, there we go. And now we have to render, or what do we call it, render content function inside there. Now let me just save my file, but here is a bit of catch. If I go ahead, and I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to these buttons, so I'll just select there and provide a class name of border2 and save my file. Yep, that's cool. So I'll use like pairing for all around will be set to 4, and I guess that's looking better. So if I click on the home, so it's going to give us a home. If I click on a post, so it's going to give us post. If I click on the contact, it's going to give us a contact. So, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and go to the post, and I want to just render a lot of posts. So I'll just generate a lot of posts. Okay, so to do that, we're going to be using our post, and inside there we're going to be using array.from method, and let's just provide our length and how many you want. So I'll just provide like 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, and then we don't need the data, we only need the index, and I'm gonna just write like post inside there, or just a simple post, and render my data inside there like index plus 1. There we go. So now it's going to give us a lot of posts, and now we have to iterate over through all of that post by using the map method and render there. So I'll use like post.map, and here I'm going to only provide a post inside there as an arrow function, and I'm going to also create a div, and inside this div we have to specify our key, and the key will be set to post, and provide a class name of post, and inside this div we have to render our post. Okay, so now if I save my file, and now if I click on this post and watch what happened, everything is now freezed out. I cannot click on the home, I cannot click on the contact. You know what, let me just say that once again. If I go ahead and click on this post once again, now I can click on the home, I can go to the contact page. Until I render all of that data, it will not let me to go to any other component, and everything is now totally freeze up. So if you want to try this code by yourself, you can totally go ahead and try that by yourself, but I think I'm demonstrating that a bit cool. If I click on this post, I cannot go to any other component until all of that data is rendered. Okay, so it is taking a lot of time, and now for this kind of situation we are going to be using the use transition hook. We are not going to be using a use transition hook in the day-to-day life. That's just the thing you have to keep in mind. But whenever you want to render a lot of data, like I mean this amount of data, so for that situation you may use the use transition hook. And yeah, let me just show you how we can refactor our code to use the use transition hook. So to do that, first of all I'm going to go into my app component, and I am going to import the use transition hook from the React.js. So I'll just use like use transition. So I'll just create first of all, or you know what, let me just call this use transition function, and I am going to store them in some sort of a something or something like that. I'm going to store them inside the something and log that something to the console. So now if I save my file, and I'm gonna go ahead and go to my inspect element, go to my console, and now let me just refresh there. So it's gonna give us a few things. It's gonna give us first of all the false. It's gonna also give us a function. Okay, so that false will be the state, like is it pending or not. Okay, so if it is pending, it's going to give us true, but if it is not pending, it's going to give us false. No, so now in this case it is not pending, so it is now giving us a false. And yeah, we have a function which we can provide for our loaded data. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to destructure my what do we call it, is pending, and I'm going to also destructure the start transition function from there. Now I'm going to delete this line of code. Next, we only have to refactor this code, so I'm going to also collapse there, and now I'm going to go ahead and just change the, instead of using this set active tab, I'm going to change that to like handle tab change or something. Okay, I'm going to copy the name of there and provide there here, and also I'm going to just replace there with this handle change. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just create that handle change function. So I'll use like const handle change. It's gonna take a tab as a parameter, and now inside this function we are going to be using our start transition function, which is coming from this use transition. So we have to just, it's gonna give us an asynchronous function which causes a state update that can be deferred. I know this is a bit mouthful to say, but yeah, I am going to provide my arrow function inside there, and now inside this arrow function I'm going to be using a set active tab and provide my tab inside there. I'll basically call this set active tab, and we have to specify this tab inside there, which we are providing right here. Like we are now providing a home, we are also providing a post, and we are also providing this contact right here. Okay, so I'm gonna also use my flag right here. So if it is pending, so I'll use like if it is pending, in that situation we only want to show some sort of a loader, so I'll use like paragraph, and I'm gonna say like loading dot dot dot, and let's just save our file, and that's the refactor that we have to do. So now I'm inside the home tab. If I click on this post, so it's gonna give us that loading, and that loading is coming from this is pending flag. Okay, so it's gonna give us that that loading, and then it's gonna render all of our content right here. Let me just refresh them. I am now inside the home component. If I click on the post, then I can also click on the contact, and it's gonna brings us to the contact. So yeah, that was just the basics of what do we call it, the use transition function, or hook to be precise, in React 19. Time for our tabs project setup. So I'm going to use npm create read at latest, and the name will be tabs. I'm going to choose React.js and TypeScript, and now let me go into the tabs project and install every single thing for them. Then's done, I'm going to also install the React icons library. I don't even know if we are going to be using React icons or not. So I guess that's going to be it. So I'm going to open that in my VS Code right here, so close there. Now let me make a cleanup. So I'm going to remove this public folder, and I will also remove this assets app.css, and also we will remove every single thing from the app.tsx and replace it with our own custom component. I'm going to also remove every single thing from there, and the rest of them is fine. So now let me just click on this getting started and go to the frameworks and guides, choose Vite, and copy this command, and now let me open my terminal and place it right here. So it's going to install Tailwind CSS in my machine. So I'm going to go back. Now let me hit enter. While it's doing that, I'm going to copy that, and let's just go into my tailwind config.js file and replace it with this content like so. I'm going to also go ahead and copy that and go to my index.css and place my styling there, and let me just test this out. So I'm going to copy this line out, go to my app, and replace it with this new h1 right here. Save my file, and now let me use my npm run dev. So it's going to start my server, and let's just refresh there. We are now getting our hello world with the styling, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to remove this h1 from here, and we are going to be rendering our sidebar and also our profile. But first of all, let me just create a div, and inside this div we are going to be rendering both of their components. So I'll just create a component with the name of, or you know what, a folder with the name of components, and inside there we're going to be defining our sidebar.tsx and also our profile.tsx. I'm going to go into the sidebar, use my RAFCE inside them, go to my profile and use my RAFC inside there as well. And now let me render both of these components. So I'm going to use like sidebar and render them. I'm going to also use the profile and also render this component, and this is how both of them looks like. So I'm going to start working on the sidebar. So I'm going to go into the sidebar component, and we're not going to be doing anything crazy inside the sidebar, but we are going to be providing a lot of styling. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove this div, and I'm going to replace it with the aside, ASIDE, there we go. Okay, and I'm going to also provide the class name of sidebar fixed, and top will be set to 0, left will be set to 0, Let me go back for a few times, and height will be set to screen, which means like totally full. Width will be set to 20. I'm going to also provide a background color of 1A, 1C, and 1E. That's going to be the background color. I'm going to also change the text to totally white, and inside this sidebar, let me just zoom in a bit. We're going to be creating our UL, which will have the classes of pairing for all around will be set to 4, flex and flex will be set to column. And let's just write word justify like so. Justify will be set to between, and items will be set to center. For the height, we are going to be setting there totally full. Let me just save my file. I'm going to create a div with a class of top, and inside there we are going to be creating our li with a class of margin for the bottom will be now set to 2, and create a div with a class of flex, and also items will be set to center. Inside their div, we're going to be just creating our fa home, and there's going to be our icon, and I'm going to also style this icon. So I'll just write like class name of margin for the right will be set to 2, margin for the bottom will be set to 3, and the size I'm going to increase that to 18. Save my file, and this is how everything looks like right here. We only have our home icon, and which is looking cool. Now underneath this li, you know what, let me just duplicate this li for like a few times. Let's just duplicate there one time, and I'm going to change that to fa user, and grab that from the React icons. Let me just save that, and yeah, we are getting the user, which is looking cool. And I'm going to also duplicate that for the final time. So let's just duplicate that and change this icon to fa search like so. And yeah, we are now getting our search, which is looking cool. And now underneath this div, we are going to be defining our bottom div. Like that was for the top UI. Let me just collapse there. That was for the top UI, which you can see right here. Now we are going to be pushing our icons to the bottom. So for that, we are going to be creating our bottom div right here. So let me just give it the class of bottom, and you can basically give it any class that you prefer. I'm going to write a li. Inside the li, we are going to be using our IOMD settings, SETTINGS, and I'm going to also provide the size of 18 to there. And now underneath that, we are going to be also rendering our fa user from or React icons, and provide a class name of margin for the top will be set to 5, and the size will be set to 18. Save my file, and now we are also getting these icons right here. Basically, you can change that anything that you like, but in my case, that's looking better. So that was it about for the sidebar. Next, we're going to be working with the profile component. Now let me just zoom in a bit, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a state for the banner URL and also for the profile URL. So I'll just create a banner URL in lowercase, and then set banner URL, and that's going to be equals to the uState. And for the initial value, I'm going to specify this string. Okay, so which is going to be basically just a prototype or a simple image. Let me just show you that. If I go to a new screen, and we're going to be getting like 1500 x 400, so this is going to be basically our banner image, and just for prototype, and we would be able to change that in a few seconds. Okay, so that's going to be for the banner. We're going to be also creating a profile URL, so I'll just create like profile URL and also set profile URL, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and this uState will have this link right here, which is just a placeholder image with 100. So now let me also show you that one. So this is how, god damn it, I'm gonna have to copy only the image link, and let me just place that here, and yeah, this is what we are going to be getting for the profile. Now let me go into the UI, so I'll just remove this profile and provide my class name to there. So it's going to be relative, and width will be set to 94%, just like that, and the margin for the left will be set to 5 rems. Inside this div, we're going to be creating a div with the class of relative, and inside this div, we are going to be defining our image, and I'm going to remove them. Now we are going to be providing our banner image, so I'm going to copy them and place them right here. And for the alternative text, I'll just provide like some sort of a, background image or something like that would be fine. And for the classes, I will provide like width will be set to totally full, and height will be 6 to 60, and also the object will be set to cover, so it's going to take the entire div. So now let me show you that, and here you can see we are now getting our banner, which is looking cool. Now let me also take care of the profile, but now underneath that, we're going to have to create our button. So this button will include a lot of classes, so now let me just provide all of them. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to make it so that this is going to be absolute. This is now relative, so this button will be the absolute for this relative. Top will be set to 2, and the right side will be set to 2. Background will be gray of 800, 800, and text will be set to totally white. Pairing for all around will be set to 2, rounded totally full. And whenever somebody hover over there, we want to change the background color to gray of 600, like so. And inside there, let me just save my file. Inside this button, we're going to be creating our label. And you know what, we're not going to be providing any HTML4 today, but we will provide HTML4. So I'll just write like banner upload or something like that, upload. And we're going to be also providing a class name of cursor to pointer. Label, we're going to be creating a FA camera icon. Let's just get that from the React icons, and I'm going to increase the size of that to 24. Now let me just save that, and yeah, this is how we are going to be getting our icon. Now underneath this label, we are going to be defining our input field. So I'll just write an input. Type will be set to file in this case because we are going to be uploading some sort of an image. Okay, so I'm going to also provide the ID of banner upload to this one because we've already specified this banner upload for the HTML4. Okay, and I'm going to also provide the accept flag, so it's going to accept every single image. And also we are going to be providing a class name of hidden to that, so it's going to hide there. And when somebody try to change something, we are going to be firing this function which is a handle banner change. Okay, so now let me save that. It's going to obviously give us an error because we have to create this function. Okay, so you know what, let me just create this function right away. So I'm going to go to the top, and here I'm going to define my banner image. So I'll use like const banner or handle banner image or handle banner change. It's going to take the event. We're going to be first of all creating our file. So I'll just use a file, and it's going to be coming from the event.target.files, and we only want to get the first element out of there. Okay, I'm going to explicitly define that as any because this is just a file, so it doesn't really matter the type. And we're not going to be doing anything crazy. And now let me just check if we got the file, if we have the file. So in that situation, we're going to be running this set banner URL, and we want to change that to the URL.create object URL. And here we're going to be specifying our file. So now what in the world is this URL and then .create object URL? This line of code is used to create a temporary URL that point to the blob or file object in JavaScript. So yeah, this is what we are going to be doing right now. And we are totally done with this one. So now let me just test this out. First of all, I'm going to go to my YouTube channel, and then I'm going to download my own banner. I'm going to save that to my desktop. And now I'm going to click on this icon. And here I'm going to just choose my banner right here. So whenever I click on there, it's going to add my banner from my YouTube channel, and it's going to add that right here. So which is looking cool, but we also have to take care of our profile image as well. So now underneath there, we are going to be also creating a logo or a profile image, whatever you want to call that. So now underneath this div here, we're going to be defining our, channel logo. There we go. And here let's just take care of our channel logo. I'm going to create a div with a class of flex, and items will be set to center. Margin for the left will be set to 4, and margin for the top will be set to arbitrary value like 2 rems. And now inside this div, we're going to be defining our image, and for the image text, we're going to be providing our profile URL, which we've already set up above. And now for this alternative text, I'm going to write like channel logo or something like that. And for the class name, I'm going to provide a width of 40, and the height will be also set to 40, and object will be set to totally cover. Okay, and I'm going to also make it totally rounded full so that we get our perfect circle. I'm going to also change that to border totally white and relative, relative. There we go. So now I'm going to save my file, and yeah, we are getting our profile kind of a logo. But we also need a camera icon there. So now let me just provide a camera icon there. Okay, so I'm going to first of all create my button with the class of absolute. And inside there, I'm going to also provide the margin for the left of 3.6 rem, and margin for the top will be set to 10 rem, and background will be set to totally gray of 800, and text will be set to totally white. Padding for all around will be set to 2, rounded will be set to 4, and whenever somebody hover over there, we are going to be changing the background color to gray of 600. And inside this button, we are going to be rendering our FA camera icon. And I'm going to also provide a class name, or not class name, but the size of 24. So if I save my file and check this out, so okay, we are getting something. This is not what we want, so I'm going to cut there and create my label first of all. And for the label, I'm going to provide like profile upload, and we're going to be also providing a class name of cursor, and which will be set to pointer. And inside this label, we're going to be providing our camera. and I just specify these two classes and I remove their other ones. So here you can see we are providing a margin for the left, but we are now reverting them by using the minus, and I just specify 6rem, and we are also providing a z index so that we can see our icon. So if I remove this, we are not able to see there. If I do provide my z index, we are now able to see our icon there. I'm going to also provide the margin for the top of 2 rems so that we can see there, or you know what, 6 rem would be fine. God damn it, 8 or 9 rems. 9 rem is looking cool. Yeah, 9 rem is looking cool. Now underneath this label, what do you want to do? We just want to create our input field, so I'll use like input, and the type will be set to file. Here we also have to specify the ID, which will be set to profile upload. Okay, like so. We are going to be also providing the except flag, which will be set to image and every single image. Okay, and class name will be set to hidden, so we just want to hide there. And when somebody try to change there, we are going to be firing this function which will be handle profile change. I'm gonna copy the name of there, go to the top and create this function. Underneath there, I'll just use like const handle profile change. It's gonna take the event and that's gonna be set to any. And here I'm gonna write like file, not files, but just a file, which will be coming from the event.target.file, or goddammit, files, and the first file. And now underneath that, we just have to check if we have the file. So in this situation, we are going to be using like set profile URL, and we are going to be providing a URL API, and then inside there we have our create object URL, and then just paste our file inside there. Okay, so here you can see if I click on there, but before I do, I'm gonna have to save my profile image and also save there. Now let me click on this icon. I can choose my image, and who is this amazing guy? Awesome. So yeah, I can change the background color, and I mean like background image, and I can also change the profile image. Now underneath this button, we're going to be providing our channel details. There we go. And now underneath there, let's just create our div. The class of margin for the left will be set to 4. Margin for the top will be also set to 4. Okay, so h1 with the class of text 2xl, and font will be set to bold, which will take my own name. You can specify your own name if you wanted to. So I'll write like Hussein web dev baby. So if I save there, we're now getting there, but that's not looking that cool. So just provide a margin for the left of 4 rem would be fine. And now underneath there, we're going to be creating our paragraph with a label of 1 million views. Did I even get a 1 million views? I'm not quite sure about that. But create a paragraph with a class of margin for the top of 2, and which will have a bit of description. I'm going to just place this description right here. Like, this is a short description for the YouTube channel. It gives the overview of the content and what viewer can expect, or yeah, expect. So I'll also provide the margin for the left of 4 to this one, 4 rem. Copy there and create a class name for the paragraph and place that there. Still amazing. Finally, I'm gonna create a subscribe button, and you guys should subscribe to my YouTube channel. So margin for the top will be set to 4, and background color will be set to red of 600. And I'm gonna also provide a text of totally white. Padding for the y-axis will be 2, padding for the x-axis will be 4, and totally rounded. And whenever somebody hover over there, we are going to be doing that arbitrarily. So I'll just write like background totally red and 500 inside there. And inside this button, I'll just say like subscribe baby, save my file. Now we are getting our subscribe button, but we also have to specify the margin for the left of 4 rem, like so. And yeah, this is looking better. Now that we have to create our tabs component, so I'm going to create a component with the name of tab.tsx, or tabs rather, and I'm going to be using my arrayfce inside there. Now let me just save this file. And here we have to call our tabs component right here. Okay, so I'm going to save my file right now. Check this out. So here you can see we have our tabs component, which is looking cool. So what I'm going to do is that, first of all, let me just zoom in a bit. I'm going to place the tabs data right here. Okay, so here you can see we have our tabs array, and inside this tab array we have a few objects. So each object will have the ID, icon, label, and content. So this is how our content will look like. First of all, we are going to be creating an array with the 6 item, and then we are going to be iterating over through each of that item. Then we are creating a card component, and that card component will accept the key prop, title, description, and also the image. Okay, so yeah, here you can see we have there like a few times, and we are going to be iterating over through there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just import all of that icons. Like, first of all, we are going to be importing the FA home, And we are going to be also creating this card, or you know what, let me just create this card right away. So I'm going to just create a component with the name of card.tsx, and let's just use our RAFC inside there. And I'm going to also import there right in here. I'm going to remove this D and rewrite there and hit enter, so it's going to import there right here. Okay, so let's just import this icon, and we are going to be also creating the about component, so I'm going to also do there right now. Okay, so let's just create our about.tsx and use the RAFC inside there, save this file, and go to this tabs component and import my about right here. Okay, and we're going to be also importing this icon. Let's just import this icon. I'm gonna also import this phone icon, and I guess that's going to be the last one. We also have to create this contact component, so I'm going to create a component with the name of contact.tsx, and I'll just use the RAFC inside there. And now let me import there right here. So if I save my file, so that's going to be like all of the data. So I'm going to collapse there, and yeah, that's done. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our state forward tab. So I'll just write like active tab and then set active tab is going to be equals to the use state, and for the initial value we're going to be providing all of the tabs data, and we are going to be getting the first tab out of there, and from that first tab we are going to be getting the ID. Okay, so that's done. And now let's get into the UI. So I'm going to remove this tab from here. I'm going to provide a class name, and pairing all around will be set to 4, margin for the top will be set to 3 rem, and inside this div we are going to be creating a div with a class of flex, and border for the bottom, and also border gray of 200. Let me just go back, and inside this div now we are going to be iterating over through all of their tab. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write like tabs and then iterate over through all of their tab, and let me just provide it tab like so. Inside there we are going to be creating our button, and this button will have a lot of styling, but you know what, yeah, I'm gonna just do that right now. For the key, we are going to be getting the key by using the tab.id. I'll also provide the class names to them, but they will be dynamic, so I'm gonna have to use the template literal for that. So I'll use like flex1, text will be set to totally center, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, and font will be set to medium like so. Text will be set to totally small, and we have to render our active tab right here. So if our tab is active, and let me just write like triple equals to tab.id. So if that's the case, so in that situation we are going to be changing the border to border bottom of 2. But if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to text gray of 600 right here. Let me just write a 600. God damn it, 600. And when somebody clicks on there, we're going to be firing this function. So I'll just use like this arrow function, which will say like set active tab, and here we have to specify the tab.id inside there. Inside this button we're going to be creating a div with a class of flex, and then items. Let me just write items, and center we're going to be also providing a justify of center. Space will be set to the x-axis of 2. Inside this div I'll just use like what do we call it, tab.icon, and also underneath there I'm going to create a span which will take the tab.label. I'm going to save this file. So we are now getting these tabs. If I click on the about, it's going to give us the about section. If I click on the project, so it's going to give us the project, courses, and also the contact. So that's looking cool. Now underneath this div, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a div with a class of margin for the top will be set to 4, pairing will be set to 4, and also totally rounded large. And inside this one we are going to be using tabs.find, and here we have to specify the tab, and now we just have to use the tab.id. That's going to be triple equals to the active tab. Let's just write our active tab, and if that is the case, we only want to get the content out of there. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see it's going to give us like card that much time. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into my card component, and now let me just take care of that. Time to create the card component. So we first of all need the title, description, the image, and also the link from our props. And for them we are going to be also creating an interface. So I'll just create an interface with the name of card props, and inside there let's just provide our title, and that's going to be a string, and description will be also a string, and the image will be string, and finally we have to provide the link. Everything is a string. Okay, and we have to also annotate there with our card prop right here. Save my file. Next we have to use there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this card, go back, and inside there we will first of all define our card by providing a max. Come on, let's just provide our max width of small, and also provide the mx like Margin for the x-axis will be set to auto, and margin all around will be set to 1 rem. And let's just provide the background color, and background color will be set to 1A, 1C, and 1E, like so. And we're going to be also providing a rounded large. Shadow will be set to medium, and overflow will be set to hidden in this case. Now let me just use my image, and for the image we're going to be rendering our image totally dynamically. So I'll just use the image. I'll just write like title right here, and I'm going to also provide the class name. Width will be set to totally full, and also height will be set to 48, like so. And object will be set to totally cover so that we can see all of this. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting all of their images, which are looking great. Now underneath there we're going to be defining our div with the class of padding all around will be set to 6, and now inside there let's just use our h2 with the class of text to XL, and the font will be set to totally bold. Margin for the bottom will be set to 2, and here let's just render our title like so. We are going to be also using a paragraph with the class of text totally set to gray of 700. Margin for the bottom will be set to 4, and let's just render our description right here. So I'll just use a description, and now underneath that we have to create our anchor tag, which will not take anything, but we are just going to be providing our link right here. So I'll just use a link, and I'm going to provide a lot of class names to it. So I'll just use like inline block, and also padding for the x-axis will be set to 4. Padding for the y-axis will be set to 2. Background color will be set to totally white. Text color will be set to totally black. Font will be semi-bold like so, and totally rounded large. And shadow, whenever somebody hover over there, so we just want to change the background color to gray of 600. And also on the hover, text will be set to totally white. I'm going to also specify the transitions, and duration will be set to 200. Inside this anchor tag we will just select learn more. If I save my file, and this is how it looks like, but they are looking awful. They are looking super awful. To fix that, I'm going to go into my CSS and provide this line of CSS. So we only want to change the background color to this one and provide a text color to that one. Okay, so now if we change there, and that's not looking that cool. Yeah, it is not looking that cool. Remove that once again. Also remove the text color, and yeah, it is looking cool. Yeah, it is looking great. So we can do a lot of stuff with them, but you know what, I don't have a lot of time for this UI. You can change the UI to like however you want, but I only want to focus on the logic. So let's get into the about section. The about section will be super straightforward, so I'll just go ahead and remove the about right here and change that to section, and also change that one to section as well. And let's just provide our class name of background gray of 100, and padding for the y-axis will be set to 12. Padding for the x-axis will be set to 4. And for the smaller screen size, we are going to be setting the padding for the x-axis of 6, and for the larger screen, padding for the x-axis will be set to 8. Okay, 8. And inside this section, we are going to be creating a div with the class of max width, which will be set to 4XL, and also margin for the x-axis will be set to auto. Inside this div, let's just create our h2 with the class of text to 3XL to be precise, and font will be set to extra bold. Okay, and the text will be also set to gray of 900, and margin for the bottom will be set to 4. God damn it, 6. There we go. And I'm gonna write like about Hussein, and you can specify your own name. And here you can see we are now getting our about Hussein, which is looking great. But now underneath this h2, what do you want to do? You just want to create our paragraph, in which will say like text of totally large, and text will be set to gray of 700. Now let me just place all of that stuff about myself. You don't even have to worry about any of that, and you can also copy and paste that, or you can just ask ChatGPT to write there for you. And now underneath there, I'm gonna also create a paragraph once again with the class of margin for the top will be set to 4. Text will be set to not extra large but just large. Text will be set to gray of 700. So I'll just write a 700 and hit enter, and inside them I'm going to place my more content. So these are just the videos if you want to watch there, and this is just about section about me. Now let me just go ahead and go to the projects, and that's also done. We also have to go into the courses, that's also done. But finally we have to take care of this contact section, and we are done. Now let me go ahead and go to my contact. Let's just provide my context section right here. As you can see, I have a links array, and inside this array I have a few objects. Each object will have the reference, the label, and also the icon. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna also place all of their icons right here, so their errors are now successfully gone. If you want to provide your own links, you are more than welcome to do that. But if you want to provide mine, so you can also go ahead and copy that from my GitHub repository. So let me just close that. And now we are going to be iterating over through there, and then we are going to be rendering there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this contact from here and select this div and change there to a section. I'm going to provide the class name of background gray of 100. Pairing for the y-axis will be set to 12, pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, and for the smaller screen size we are going to be providing pairing for the x-axis of 6, and for the large screen size we are going to be providing pairing for the x-axis of 8. Inside this section we are going to be creating our h2 with the classes of text 3xl, and font will be set to extra bold, and text will be gray 900, and margin for the bottom will be set to 6. So contact me and save my file. Now here you can see we're now getting our contact me section right here, and now underneath there let's just create our div with the class of links, and items is now set to center. And here we're going to be iterating over through all of their links from here. Like as you can see, we have all of their links, and now you want to iterate over through all of them and provide each of the link. Inside the links we're going to be rendering our anchor tag, and I'm going to remove this href and change that to link.href. I'll also provide the key, and for this key I'll just render like link.label. We also have to provide the target, and target will be set to dash blank. Provide the relation and also the classes. So for the classes, flex and items will be set to center, space will be set to x-axis of 2, and text will be set to gray of 900, and somebody hover over there, so text will be set to gray 600. Margin for the right will be set to 2 rems, like so. Rem, 2 rem, rem. There we go. And now inside this one, what do you want to do? You just want to write over link.icon, save my file. And now underneath this link icon, let's just create our span. The classes will be text large. That's gonna be it. And here we have to render our link.label, like so. And that's gonna be it for the context section. So let's just check this out. Here you can see we have a Twitter or X nowadays. We have a YouTube, GitHub, and Instagram. Okay, so that's the context section. We have a courses, projects, about, and home. We can also provide our own profile image. We can also provide the banner image from our computer. And this is just our basic project. Time to make a setup for our third project. So let's just write npm create with add latest. The project name is blogs, and I'm going to choose React.js with TypeScript. Go into the blogs, and now let's just install every single thing. Now I'm going to go into the Tailwind CSS, click on the getting started, go to the framework and guide. Now let me copy this command and place it right here inside my integrated terminal. Hit enter to configure a Tailwind CSS, and also I'm going to copy this content. Let's just copy there and go into my Tailwind config and replace it with this content. So let's just do that. I'm going to also go ahead and copy every single thing from there, go to the index.css file and replace it with this new one. Okay, and I guess that's going to be it, but I'm going to copy there. Let's just go into the app.not.css but app.tsx and remove every single thing from there, and I'll just write a RAFCE, and let's just write this h1 right here. Okay, so I'm going to open my terminal once again and use npm run dev, and let's just check this out. Yep, we are getting a hello world, but I'm going to also make a bit of cleanup. So I'll just remove this assets folder, the public folder, the app.css folder, and yeah, I guess the rest of them will be fine. Next, we are going to be defining our navigation. So I'll just create a div, and inside this div we are going to be rendering our navigation. But first of all, let me just create a folder with the name of components, and inside there we are going to be creating our navigation.tsx. I'll use the RAFCE and register there right here inside the app component, like navigation. This component, save my file, and here you can see we're now getting our navigation, which is looking cool. So let's just style our navigation, then we're going to be jumping into the next stuff. So I'll change this div to nav because we are creating our navigation, and I'll provide a class name of border2, and text will be set to totally black, border will be gray of 200, pairing will be set to 4, and it's going to be a flex, justify will be set to between, and items will be set to center. Inside this navigation, we're going to be creating a div with the class of flex, and then items will be set to center, border will be set to 2 and totally rounded, full, pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, max width will be set to medium, and margin for the left will be set to arbitrary value. So I'll just use like 5 rem, Inside this div, we are going to be rendering our icon, but first of all, we have to install that. So I'll use npm i and then react icons. So it's going to install that in my machine. Now that's done, let me use my npm run dev once again, and I'll just use like fa search from where, from the react icons. So let's just render them. Now underneath them, we are going to be using our input field with the type of text. I'm going to also provide the placeholder which will say like search dot dot dot, and I will also provide the class name. Background will be set to totally transparent, and also outline will be set to none, and width will be set to totally full. Okay, I'm gonna go back so that you guys can see everything a bit better, and this is how it looks like right here. I know it is looking awful, but yeah, it is looking still a bit better. Now underneath this div, we're going to be creating a section with the class of flex, and then items. Come on, items will be set to center, and I'm gonna also provide margin for the right of 5 rem, like so. And inside this section, let's just render our fa user circle. Okay, I rendered them, and I'm gonna provide the class name of text will be set to 3xl, margin for the right will be set to 2. If I save my file and check this out, so here you can see we are now getting our icon, and we are also getting this search field right here. Now I'll go to my app.tsx once again, and here inside there, I'll create a div with the class of flex and justify center, and inside this div, we're going to be creating our main area right here, but not right now. Now underneath there, we're going to be creating our div with the class of width, and the width will be arbitrary value like 30%, and let's just close there. Inside this div, we're going to be defining a few components. Let's just start from a people to follow component. So I'll just create a component with the name of people to follow.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFCE inside there and render people to follow right here. Save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our people to follow component, which is looking great. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to place these people to follow, and we have a few people names and also the following list. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to iterate over through there and render them into this component. Okay, so I'll just remove this people to follow. I'm going to provide a bit of classing to it. So background will be set to totally white, and padding will be set to 4, and rounded totally large shadow. And now underneath there, create a h3 with the class of font semi bold. Text will be large, and margin for the bottom will be set to 4, which will say like people or who to follow, whatever you want to call there. Then create a div with the class of space y. Inside there, let's just iterate over through all of that people to follow. So I'll just put that right here, and I'm going to use the map method. It's going to take the person and also the index, and inside this arrow function we are going to be creating our user card, which will take a key as a prop, and inside the key we are going to be providing our index, and then it's going to also take the person as the main value. Okay, so I'm going to close there and create my card component right here. I'll just use a or user card.tsx. Inside there, let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, and render that right here. So we have to render our user card component, and here you can see we're now getting user card a lot of time. Now let me go into this user card and create that. So it takes the index and it also takes the person. Okay, so let me just create interface for this. So like user interface, user card props or something like that. I'll provide an index which will be set to a number, and I'm going to also provide a person which will be set to a string, and I'll annotate that with the user card prop. And now let's get into the UI. I'm going to remove this user card from here, and I'm going to provide the class name to there. So let's just provide a flex, and items will be set to center, and justify will be set to between in this case. Inside this div, we're going to be creating a section with a class of flex, and items will be set to center. Inside there, let's just render our icon, which is fa user circle, and render there right here. With also these classes like text will be set to 3xl, margin for the right will be set to 3, and text will be set to totally gray of 500 like so. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting their icons right here, which is looking cool. But now underneath there, we're going to be also creating a span, and let's just render our person.name inside there. And yeah, this is how it looks like, and they are looking cool. Now underneath this div, or this section to be precise, we're going to be creating our button, and inside this button we will just say like person FOLLOWING. If that's the case, we are going to be saying like following, but if that's not the case, we will just say like follow. and here you can see we're now getting the follow button and also the following button right here. Now let me just style that a bit, but that now let me go ahead and create another component with the name of trends list.tsx, and I'm going to use the RAFC inside. Come on, RAFC inside there once again, and go to my app.tsx and render this component right here like trends list, yeah, and render there. This is how it looks like. Is there, I'm going to render all of their trends right here. So you can also copy that from my GitHub repository if you wanted to. So basically we have array with the name of trends. Inside there we have a few objects which will have a title and also the author. Okay, so you can also create that by yourself if you wanted to, but if you want to copy that from my GitHub repository, you can totally do that. So I'll just remove this trends list from here, and I'm going to provide the class name. Background will be set to totally white, padding will be all around set to 4 and rounded large. Shadow will be also provided, and margin for the top will be set to 8. And inside this div, we're going to be creating our h3 with the class of font semi bold, and the text will be set to totally large. Margin for the bottom will be set to 4, and I'll just say like today's top trends or something like that. Now if I save my file, so this is how it looks like. They are looking great. And now let's just use our UL with the class of space on the y-axis will be set to 4, and I'm going to iterate over through all of their trends by using the map method. It's going to take the trend and also the index. So inside this function, what do you want to do? We just want to get our li, and inside that li, first of all, let me just provide a key, and the key will be their index, and I'm going to also provide a class name. Let's just write a class name. Class name will be set to flex, and flex will be set to colon. Inside that li, we're going to be using our span like so, and provide the font of medium to it. So in this case, we're going to be using trend.title, and now underneath this span, we're going to be creating our span once again with the class of text small, and also the text will be set to gray of 500. Okay, and by who? By the trend, and then dot author. Come on, go to the top, remove that icon from there, and change this one to trend.author. Now that's done. Let me check this out. So yeah, that's other component which is also looking cool. Now I'm gonna go to the app.tsx file once again and create my topic list component. So I'll use like topics list.tsx and create my component right here and register that topics list component here. I'm gonna save my file, go there once again, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to just place these topics like we have technology and design and thinking and so on and so forth. I'm going to place that here. Now I'm going to go into my UI. So I'll change the background to totally white. Padding will be set to 4, totally rounded, large, and shadow. Margin for the top will be set to 8. And inside this div, we're going to be creating our h3 with a class name of font semi bold, and also the text will be set to totally large. Margin for the bottom will be set to 4, which will say like topics for you. Save my file once again, and we are now getting our topics for you right here. Now underneath there, I'll create a div with a class of flex, and also flex will be set to wrap and wrap like so, and gap will be set to 2. Inside this div, we're going to be iterating over through all of their topics by using the map method and provide my topic. Let's just write a topic and also the index inside there. And this span will have padding for the x-axis of 3 and padding for the y-axis of 1. Background will be set to gray of 200, and the text will be set to gray of 700 like so. If I hit tab, and I'm going to also provide a text of totally small and rounded full. Cursor will be also set to pointer, and when somebody hover over there, change the background to gray of 300. And I'll also specify the key, and the key will be our index. Inside this pen, what do you want to do? We just want to render their specific topic. And now let me just save my file and check this out. So here you can see we're now getting all of their technologies and stuff topics right here. Now let me create my context. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a folder with the name of shared, and inside there we're going to be creating our blog context.tsx. And here we will need a few things like create context. We would also need the use state and also the use context as well. Okay, and now underneath there, let's just define our context. I'll just use like create context, and the initial value will be undefined, and I'm going to store them in some sort of a variable like block context, and it's going to be equals to this context. So now let me also create an interface for that. So let's just create our interface, and here it's going to take like block context type. And inside this one, first of all, we are going to be creating our blocks. This will be a huge block, so I'm going to separate that into a separate file. So I'm going to go ahead and create my file right here with the name of types.ts, and I'm going to just place these types right here. So we have ID, which will be a number, the title will be string, description will be string, the image will be string, and the time will also be string. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to grab that right here, and underneath there we're going to be also defining our add block. There's going to be a function which will take a block as a parameter. We're going to be also providing the blocks as a type, and it's going to return the void. And now also let's just provide our update block. It's going to be set to the block once again, and here we have to annotate there with the block, and inside there we're going to be only returning the void, and also we have to delete the block. So let's just provide our ID, and ID will be set to a number, and it's going to return the void. Okay, so now that's totally done. I'm going to annotate my context by using this block context type or undefined. So initially we're providing the value of undefined today, so that's great. Now that we have to create our provider, so I'll use a const and then block provider, and here we are going to be annotating there by using React.js and then functional component. Okay, so if you want to annotate them, we're going to be providing a children, and for this children we're going to be using react.react node, which will be coming from the React.js. And now let's just create our context right here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to only provide my children. Now let me just save that. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to just use my use state, and the initial value will be set to this empty array. And I'm going to also annotate that with the block, and here we have to just write a block of array. I'm going to destructure the blocks and also the set blocks out of there. Now we are going to be also creating a function which will allows us to add a block. So I'll use like add block, and it's going to be equals to the block, and I'm going to also annotate there with that block. Okay, and inside there we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but I'll just write like set blocks. And first of all we have to clone our existing blocks, and then we have to add our new one. Now underneath there we're going to be also creating one for the updating a block. So I'll just use update block, and here we have to write like update block and annotate the with our blocks type. Inside there I'm going to use my set blocks because we are going to be mutating them, and here we have to iterate over through all of the blocks. So I'll use like blocks.map, and let's just provide our block to them. And here we're going to be checking if block block.id is triple equals to the updated block.id. In that situation we are going to be rendering our updated block. Come on, updated block. But if that's not the case, we're going to be rendering our block just like that. I'm gonna copy this updated block, and now let me just put that here. And finally let me create one more function for the delete block. So I'll write a delete block. It's gonna take the ID, and ID will be a number, and inside there we're going to be using our set blocks. Here we have to provide our blocks and use a filter method, and it's going to take the parameter. So we're going to be providing the block as a parameter. We're going to be removing that specific block whose ID is not equal to the ID which we are providing for the parameter. Okay, so now that we successfully created our state, the add function, update function, and also the delete function. Now let me provide that by using my provider or context provider. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just return, and inside I'm going to be using my block context which we've created up above, and here it has a provider property, so I'm going to call them. And now for the value, I'll just provide my value right here like blocks, and then add block and update block and also delete block, like so. Now inside there we're going to be also rendering our children. That's going to be it for the block. I will also create a hook for myself. I can totally create that in the separate file, but I guess I don't have to. So I'm going to export that because we're going to be using the into multiple file. So I'll use like use blocks, and inside there we're going to be first of all consuming our context. So for that we're going to be using our use context and provide my block context inside there. And I'm going to also store that in the context variable. So I'll just use like context. And now underneath that I'm going to be checking if we don't have the context. So in that situation we're going to be throwing new error which will say like use blocks must be used within a block provider. And now underneath this check we're going to be just returning our context, and that's going to be fine. Okay, so now we are totally done with this provider, but we also have to export that so we can use them. So I'll just use like export, and then we would be able to use that. Now I'll use my provider to provide all of that value. So I'll just use like block provider, and then I'm going to close that right here like so. Now here inside this main area, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a section with the class of margin for the x-axis will be set to auto and padding will be set to 6. And inside this section we're going to be creating our div and then create a button and which will have a few classes like let me just put a bit of classes to it. Like margin for the left will be set to 7 rem, background will be set to totally black, flex and justify will be set to center, and items will also be set to center. Text will be set to totally white, and pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, totally rounded. Margin for the bottom will be set to 4. Inside there for the label I'll just use like add new block, and here we're going to be adding a new block. So I'll just use like io md add circle and hit enter. So it's going to add there right here. And for the class name I'm going to provide the margin for the left of 0 of 0.5 rems. Okay, so now if I save my file, check this out. So here you can see we are now getting our button, which is looking cool. But we're going to be also attaching an event handler on there. So when somebody clicks there, we're going to be firing this function, which will be open model for new blog. Okay, so we're going to be creating this function in a few seconds, but first of all we have to create our stat. So I'm going to go to the top and create my stat right here. I'm going to define these two stats like is model open and then set is model open, and inside there we're going to be also getting our use stat and also editing block and set editing block, and we're going to be getting our block types from this types file. Okay, so now underneath there we also have to define two functions. So for the first function we're going to be defining like open model for new block. Inside this function, what do you want to do? Set editing block, you want to set that to no, and then set model open and you want to set that to true. Now underneath this function we're going to be defining one more function for the open model for edit, and here inside this function we're going to be saying like set editing block, and the initial value will be set to block, and also set model open. Here we're going to be setting that to true. Now that's successfully done. I'm gonna go to my UI once again. Now underneath this button, what do you want to do? Here we're going to be also rendering our article list component, which we're going to be creating in a few seconds. But now I'm going to check if our model is open, then show this UI. But if our model is not open, then don't show anything at all. And I'm going to first of all create my model component, which I am going to do in a few seconds. So I'm going to close there. And it's going to take a lot of things, and it should be a model like so. I'm going to copy there and place it right here. And now let me just go ahead and create this model component inside my components folder. So I'll use like model.tsx and define my model component right here. So I'll use my RAFCE inside there. And here what I want to do, I want to use my React and then functional component from the React.js, and here it's going to take a children. So I'll just write like children, and that children will be React.React node, just a React node like so. And I'll also close them. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we also have to specify the onClose prop, and it's going to be a function, and it's going to just return the void. Okay, so that's totally done. I'm going to close there like so. Now for the actual props, we're going to be only returning the children and then the onClose right here. So now if I save my file, so this is how it looks like. And now for this UI, I'm going to first of all provide a lot of classes like fixed, and then insert will be set to 0, and background will be set to totally black. Background opacity will be set to 50 in this case, and also flex items will be center, justify will be center, and inside this div we are going to be creating yet another div with a class of background totally white. Pairing will be set to 4, totally rounded large, and also shadow, and this div will be relative like so, and provide my children inside there. And now underneath there we are going to be also creating a button, and which will just say X like cross, and we are going to be also providing a classes for this one as well, like absolute. Top will be set to 2, right will be set to 2, and text will be set to gray of 500 like goddamn 500. There we go. And when somebody clicks on this button, so we're going to be firing the onClose function, which it is taking as a prop. Now our model is totally done. We have to import that model right here, and I'm going to just hit enter. So it's going to import that here. For this model, I'm going to pass my onClose function, onClose, and that function will be just an arrow function, which will just say like set model open, and here we have to specify the false value inside there. And inside this one, we're going to be also providing our block form, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So now let me just save my file and create this block form component. So I'm going to just use like block form.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFCE inside there and import my block form component right here. Check this out. So if I click on there, it's going to give us that block form, It's going to also give us that X symbol. So if I click on this, it's going to make it disappear. Now let's start work on this block form component. So it's going to take two props. So the first prop it will take is the existing block. That's going to be set to the editing block, which we have defined up above. And I'm going to also provide the on close. So on close, and it's going to take the arrow function. So I'll just use like arrow function by providing a set model open, and I'm going to change there to false. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and let's just go into this block form component. And the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our custom hook, which is the use block. Okay, we already defined that in the content. And what I want to do is that I want to just destructure the add block and also the update block from where? From the use block. Okay, and now underneath there, we're going to be also defining our title and then set title, and that's going to be equals to the use state. And for the initial value, we're going to be first of all destructuring our existing block. You know what, let me just go ahead and grab the name of them. So I'll just copy the name of that, put that right here, and I'm going to also get this on close and put that right here. So now it's going to give us a lot of errors. So I'm going to use my React functional component and annotate that with the block form props. And now let me just create their types right here. So we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but we're going to be creating our interface with the name of block form props. It's going to take the existing block and we have to annotate them with our block, which we're going to be getting from these types. And now we also have to provide the on close, and it's going to be just a function which will just return the void. That's already done, and we're now successfully annotating there. And now we have to use the inside our component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to also create a state for the description, and then set description. It's going to be equals to the use state. And here I also forgot the initial value for this one. So if we have the existing block, and then we are going to be getting a description out of there. So if we already have there, so then use there. But if you don't have there, then we are going to be setting there to empty string. And now for this description, we are going to be also providing the existing block. And from this existing block, we're going to be getting a description. And for this one, we are going to be getting a title. There we go. Okay, so if you already have the existing description, then use there. But if you don't, then just provide the empty string right here. And now underneath there, we are going to be also creating a state for the image and then set image, and it's going to be equals to the use.